All right, let's get it. Drive time Wednesday afternoon, 15 minutes past the hour of 2 o'clock. It is another beautiful, warm May/summer-like day outside. And as it is every single day, it's going to have you along for the ride. Spence Checketts behind the mic. Porter Larson behind the glass, booking the show, producing the show today. How do you like 80 degrees and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah? It's going to be a warm week. It's going to be a scorching hot weekend. We're going to get some rain and colder temperatures coming up next week as we are about to turn our calendars to June. It's wild that 2025 is already almost halfway over. I'm getting old. Time is going very, very fast. It's also a mental construct. I did not take an edible before the show. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole today. But hello, how are you? Happy Wednesday. Halfway through that work week, one day closer to the weekend. We're going to do some NBA playoffs on the show today. Both the West and the East appear to be over. Maybe not. We'll talk about it. Oklahoma City is looking to punch their ticket to the NBA Finals tonight at 6:30 on ESPN. Unfortunately, ESPN still has NBA basketball on their platform, even though their coverage could not be worse. And they're not going anywhere. They're part of the new deal moving forward, too. But anyway, T-Wolves Thunder, Paycom Center, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. The Thunder are trying to advance to the NBA Finals for the first time since 2012. And we'll see if Minnesota can at least make it interesting tonight. OKC is a healthy favorite. That is a tough place to play, even when they're not very good, and they're historically special this year. So we'll see if OKC can get it done tonight and advance to the NBA Finals. The Indiana Pacers really dictated the tempo last night, and that really is the story. We'll talk about it, but the Knicks were never really able to figure things out rotationally on defense. A lot of bad closeouts, a lot of bad miscommunications. A lot of wide-open shots for the Pacers and a historically brilliant game from their point guard, Tyrese Haliburton. And apparently we're supposed to debate whether or not he's a superstar. I don't know. Not sure we'll do that today. But the Pacers lead it now in the East 3-1, and they'll try to close it out at the Garden tomorrow night at 6 o'clock on TNT. It could be the final iteration of Inside the NBA on TNT before they move over to ESPN. I think the Knicks will win it on Thursday, and then they'll go back to Indiana, where it feels like it's the Pacers in 6, but we'll get into it on the program today. It is a game day for Real Salt Lake, believe it or not. Our local soccer club is in action tonight at 6:30 Mountain Time on MLS Season Pass. Apple TV, they are taking on Austin. I think it's Austin FC. I don't know. It's the soccer team that plays in Austin. We'll see if RSL is able to, you know what, play well. How about that? We'll just go with that today. So a lot to do on the show. University of Utah football program welcoming in a bevy of recruits coming up for the 2026 class. Over the weekend, they'll be on campus. We'll get to some Utah football recruiting news, the latest on the college football landscape with the new CFP format, conference realignments, the SEC and the Big Ten flexing their muscles continuously. So we'll get to the latest on that. There's some NIL stuff that Kirby Smart had some comments on today we'll talk about. Stephon Diggs continues to prove why this younger generation needs to stop filming and posting everything. At some point, it's going to get in trouble. But we do have OTAs in pro football, as there is a little bit of NFL to get to on the program today. So good guest list for you guys on a Wednesday afternoon. We'll welcome in Tim McMahon, NBA Daily Assist style. We're a number of weeks away, but not that long away from the NBA draft. A lot of rumors surrounding the Utah Jazz, who at this point have 5 and 21 in the first and a couple of second-rounders as well. Could the Jazz get in the mix to move up? Potentially maybe add a more exciting piece. We'll do some Jazz offseason. We'll preview tonight's game and talk Knicks Pacers as well. Neil Smith, the NHL playoffs also continue to roll along. And Utah Hockey Club made some signings today. Nothing all that notable. But the Utah Mammoth. It's going to take a minute. Utah Mammoth with some transactions today. We'll get into it. And we'll ask Neil Smith about his take on what the hockey club needs to do this offseason. The Panthers are going to try to close out the Hurricanes tonight. They have a 3-1 lead in the East Finals. All 4 series in the NHL and the NBA are 3-1. Kind of a bummer because Game 7's rule. Maybe somebody will actually show up and show a little fight, but we'll have to see. So Neil Smith stops by today, 3 o'clock. Jason Kreis, RSL Club legend, will preview tonight's match, and we'll talk big picture RSL stuff with Jay today. And then CK, our guy, Christopher Camarati, joins us live in studio for an entire hour on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. It's warm enough that our guy might drive his gearless bike downtown while listening to the Smiths on his Walkman to come hang out with us live in studio. Tim McMahon, Neil Smith, Jason Christ, Chris Camarati, me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. That guy, Porter Larson, on a Wednesday. At any point last night, did you think the Knicks were going to win that basketball game?
Man, it didn't feel great. It didn't feel great really all night long. Really the second half more so than any. But when you give up that amount of points, Spence, I've said it all series long, there's a certain way the Knicks have to beat Indiana. Now, you take a W, whether it's 150, 149, or 77-78. But when you turn it into like a track meet, you turn it into what yesterday was kind of like a helter-skelter, loose ball bonanza. I don't even know what to call it. It was garbage basketball much of the game. And Indiana took advantage of that. They got more depth. They got guys that run the floor well. They got guys that don't just foul randomly because they're bored. Karl Anthony Towns, phenomenal player in certain moments, Spence, and then he forgets that he's playing professional basketball. Blows my mind. But anyway, no, I didn't really feel real good about the Knicks at any point yesterday because when you give up like 50 points in the first quarter, you don't win many basketball games.
Yeah, and they were hanging, but they were running up and down with the wrong team to run up and down with. It's like inevitably this is going to come back to bite you. Please stop playing at this pace. It won't work.
Yeah, and actually they played, I think, like 10 guys in the first half, which was surprising to me. Maybe conserving a little bit of energy for your guys later on in the game, but then you're down by 20 again. And I know that's seemingly where the Knicks have been comfortable this postseason, but you can only get away with that so many times.
All right, Live Night Events presents the 2025 Granary Live Concert Series. My guys Camp coming into town. Come on down to that show and say what's up. Powered by Nightingale College and Murdoch Hyundai. Utah's #1 Hyundai dealer. Experience outdoor concerts in the heart of downtown Salt Lake's Granary District. You can find more details on ESPN700sports.com. Tim McMahon will be our first guest on this lovely, beautiful Wednesday afternoon. But before Timmy stops by, courtesy of our good friends at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
Cash in on the basketball playoffs with Prize Picks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court to your Prize Picks lineup, whether it's points, rebounds, or assists. Take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series, starting with the play-in round. Every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you into the Take-Two ticket sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the ship. So download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. They're going to hook you up with $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. Don't even have to win the lineup to get to $50, but bottom line is if you download the Prize Picks app today, you can use the promo code ESPN700 to check out. They're going to hook you up with $50 when you play that first $5 lineup. Prize Picks run your game all season long. Today's the day to do it because they're giving you a free square, essentially. Anthony Edwards, more or less than 1 point, 0.5 essentially. So if Ant scores, you get a free square. I'm going to take, of course, over on that. Give me over on Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 9.5 points. I'll take over on Alex Caruso, 5.5 rebounds and assists. And you know what? Give me over on Julius Randle, 16.5 points, and we'll end it there. So there's some. Oh, you know what? Give me more on Naz Reid, 4.5 rebounds. There are 5 squares for you if you want to play along. All right, real quick, a couple thoughts on last night. Ultimately, this Knick team is really, really good. And maybe with the right matchup, this would look differently. I don't think they're championship caliber. I never thought that they were. And honestly, I thought that they were going to get smoked by Boston in the second round. And there's a case to be made that if Jason Tatum stays upright, the Knicks aren't in the Eastern Conference Finals. In a way, this was kind of ahead of schedule, okay? So they go all in on trading 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. 4 of those were unprotected. So they sacrificed their future draft capital, and they did that just last offseason. They move off R.J. Barrett and some other pieces to bring in OG Anunoby, who's been really good for them. They sign him. Jalen has evolved to be much better than they ever thought he would be. They move off of Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo to bring in Karl Anthony Towns. which was fine. I mean, I like Dante, and that hurt their depth a little bit. But really, when you understand what the Knicks have been doing, it is with the idea of what Boston is probably going to have to do this offseason. Like, I don't think even the Knicks themselves thought they would be in the Eastern Conference Finals because they put this team together to capitalize on potentially the Eastern Conference once Boston has the second apron tax bill come due and they have to break this group down. And that could happen this offseason. I think Boston's going to have to move off of somebody, whether it's Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Tatum, of course, out for an entire year. So the Knicks kind of built incrementally and slowly to try to capitalize next year when Boston has broken this thing down. The problem is the Pacers are crashing the party. And it's probably just simply time to say the Pacers are a better, deeper team than the New York Knicks. And here's one of the issues that is presenting itself. Rick Carlisle has played 11 or 12 players all year long, 15 or more minutes. Tom Thibodeau has played basically 6.5 players. The one player off the bench who he trusts has been Mitchell Robinson, who is now starting. Miles McBride has had a good year. I like Deuce. He's a good shot maker. Didn't do much last night. But DeLon Wright, Landry Shamet, Precious Achiuwa have been on ice. And I applaud Tom for trying to be a little bit more adaptable and going deeper in his bench. But when you just have done this over the past couple of games against a team that has played 11, 12 guys, 15-plus minutes for 82 games and now 3 rounds of the postseason, you're up against it. Like, you can't expect DeLon to be ready. And I think DeLon has given Tom some good defensive minutes. But the problem is, and you guys remember watching DeLon Wright as a Ute, he was a dynamic ball-in-hand offensive playmaker in addition to a really good defensive guard. And when it comes to DeLon with ball in hand on offense, he's peeing down his leg. He had a double dribble that looked like he was playing junior jazz last night. Like, his offensive confidence is gone. He did knock down a corner 3, but he does not look like DeLon Wright, the offensive initiator, ball in hand decision maker that we had here in Salt Lake for the Utes, because he hasn't been playing. So I applaud Tom for trying to pull this off. And Landry Shamet has given him really good minutes, both defensively, and he's actually been okay on offense. He had 3 assists in only 11 minutes last night. But the problem is, you're asking guys who have been on ice to now step up in the Eastern Conference Finals and give you 10 to 15 minutes when you haven't been playing them. And I'm going to sound a little bit like I'm contradicting myself because I think Tom has to do this. But it's a day late and a dollar short because they're not ready for the stage. And it's not DeLon's fault. It's not Landry's fault. They just haven't been playing. And that's why all year long you hear this criticism like, look, and this is, I talked about this, the final game of the Celtics series. With about 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter, it was 110-76. And Jalen Brunson was fighting over screen set by Xavier Tillman. Boston's like 14th dude. Like, Joe Mazzulla had given up, and Tom had his starting 5 in the game when they were up 40 points with 6 minutes left in the fourth. Like, that's a time to let DeLon get his feet underneath him. That's a time to let Landry Shamet dust off some rest or Precious Achiuwa just get some run. And so Tom Thibodeau has forgotten more about basketball than any of us will ever know, and I'm not necessarily sitting here calling him out for this, that, or whatever. But this has been a bit of a coaching mismatch. And Rick Carlisle is a championship coach with a really good team. And look, I know we're supposed to do the first take thing where we're debating who Tyrese Halliburton is in the ecosystem of NBA basketball. He's an all-star. He played for Team USA. He's one of the handful of the best lead guards in pro basketball. Last night didn't change that for me. Just because he had a historical game doesn't mean I'm going to change the way I talk about him one day after a great game. But he was very aggressive right off the tip. And when Tyrese is aggressive like that, this team is a problem, okay? So he goes 32 points, 15 assists, 12 rebounds, most impressively in the Eastern Conference Finals against a desperate Knick team. He didn't turn the ball over once as the primary lead guard for the Pacers, which was just spectacular. Aaron Nesmith ended up giving Rick 33 minutes of excellent defense on Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson had 3 shots in the final 8 minutes of the fourth. Jalen Brunson and Cat had 4 points combined in the fourth quarter. And how many assists do you think Jalen Brunson has had to Karl Anthony Towns during the Eastern Conference Finals? If I had to get, if I asked you to guess off the top of your head, how many assists all series long do you think Jalen has to Cat? I'm pausing for dramatic effect. The answer is one. One. We're about to go to game 5 now. One assist from Jalen Cat. They don't play well together offensively. If the Knicks are going to take the next step, they've got a Cat problem. Even though at times Cat looks like he's dominant, I just don't know that Cat kind of feels like, I don't know this to be true, but in the next generation, Cat kind of feels like the type of player we're going to be talking about in the way we talk about Carl and John and Barkley and Peyton and Kemp and Patrick Ewing, right? Great, talented players that never won championships because they were just never the guys that could get it done when the moment demanded it at its highest. But credit the Pacers. They're deep. They're good. They're a problem. And it does feel like we are high speed ahead to an Indiana OKC NBA Finals, and I cannot wait to hear media members bitch and moan about having to travel to those two cities. Speaking of which, Tim McMahon will have to travel to both of those cities. Tim will join us coming up right off the top on the other side. Then it's Neil Smith, it's Jason Christ, it's Chris Camerani. It's a jam-packed Wednesday drive, and it's good to have you with us right here on ESPN 700. The Oklahoma City Thunder look to punch their ticket to their first NBA Finals since 2012 tonight as they host the Minnesota Timberwolves at 6:30 Mountain Time on ESPN. Our next guest joins us on a weekly basis, and as I am often wont to do day to day, I'm walking the dog this morning. I'm listening to the Hoop Collective with our guy. So, Tim McMahon, right out of the gates, I know the question to ask you, is it now time to talk about Tyrese Halliburton as a legitimate superstar NBA player?
I mean, you have to. He's in the conference finals for the second straight year. He's a game away from going to the finals. And the man just had 32, 12, and 15 with no turnovers. Plus, I mean, look, I get small market, blah, blah, blah. This dude is marketable. This dude has sizzle. This dude talks trash and backs it up in emphatic fashion. Yeah, Tyrese Halliburton's absolutely a superstar. And again, as I said on the podcast, like, dude, he went through Giannis. He went through Donovan Mitchell. He's going through Jalen Brunson. If you keep knocking out superstars, you probably belong in their company, I would say.
Would you rather have Halliburton or Donovan?
I mean, I think you have to say Halliburton simply because, 2 straight years he's been to a stage that Donovan has not been able to get to. And, I think Donovan's a heck of a player. They are different players, but Halliburton has proven that he is the engine to an elite offense on a consistent basis, and it's proven playoff success. There's not a lot of guys who can say, as stars to their team that have been to back-to-back conference finals. There's two. There's him. I'm talking about right now. There's him, and there's Ant. And Ant's about to go home, and Halliburton's about to come here to Oklahoma City.
Halliburton or Brunson? Who would you rather have?
Again, you got to – eyeballs are telling you what the results say. I love Jalen Brunson. He hasn't been able to beat Halliburton. He's been outplayed in this series. And you know what? It is a little bit – I will acknowledge that's a little bit unfair because he was hurt last year during that series. If he doesn't get hurt, does the Knicks win that series? Do the Pacers not go to the conference finals? Okay. But head-to-head, look, Brunson's getting his numbers. Halliburton's getting wins. And they don't have an answer for Halliburton. Another thing, honestly, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Halliburton's some kind of defensive stopper. We know he's not. But Carlisle and Halliburton are pretty mercilessly hunting Brunson right now, and that is really benefiting the Indiana Pacers.
Halliburton or Colin Sexton?
I don't know. Am I going to have Colin Sexton in Dallas? Is he going to be in my backyard by then in the summer?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I mean, look, I've got to reach to get Jazz topics here, but I will non sequitur to try to talk a little Jazz as we're just a few weeks away from the NBA draft. And Tim, you know the deal. Like every time anybody writes a whole hey, off-season primer, what are we going to see? The Jazz are heavily mentioned as a team to watch out for. So I know where your attention and energy has been. I read everything you write and I listen to your pods, but we are in Salt Lake City. Do you have anything for this fan base about what you're hearing as far as the plans for the Jazz this offseason?
I mean, look, obviously, they're in a rebuild. They're going to be, if not aggressive shopping guys, at least. Well, can you listen aggressively? I don't know if that's a thing, but, John Collins isn't in their long-term plans. Colin Sexton may or may not be, but they'll certainly, he's not untouchable by any stretch of the imagination. And he's going to come up with, they'll have talks with the Mavericks, I'm sure. The Mavericks absolutely need a stopgap, primary initiator. He's not really a point guard. That's why I don't say point guard, but a stopgap lead guard who can transition into a six-man role once Kyrie comes back. And so Sexton would absolutely make a lot of sense there. Now, what exactly would the price be? Those are conversations that they can have.
All right. There really isn't anything else to ask you about the Jazz, so we'll move on. Now, before we get out west, let's stick with these for a minute because – the fact of the matter is when you look at most of the splits and most of the numbers, it indicates this is a very, very close matchup. And honestly, if you want to look at the glass half full as a Knick fan, that game one catastrophe If Neesmith doesn't turn into Ray Allen circa 1998, it's probably 2-2. I don't think it matters where these two teams play, Tim, whether it's New York, Indianapolis, or some blacktop playground in the Midwest. It's irrelevant. 3-1 is not insurmountable, but it kind of feels like it. I wouldn't be stunned if the Knicks send this thing back to Indiana, but it feels like the Pacers in 6. That's what my gut says. What say you?
Yeah, I would say that, and it's not insurmountable, but it's certainly not very mountable, And hey, it really does. Like at this point, it really does come down to an insane Pacers comeback and an awful Knicks collapse in Game 1. If not for that, it's 2-2. We're looking at it's anybody's series, but they don't have a solution for Halliburton. They don't have a solution for the pace that the Pacers play with. And we can say, hey, if not for that comeback, well. There's an old saying, it didn't really apply in Utah, but, fifth was a fifth, we'd all be drunk. Maybe the Knicks fans can comfort themselves with a few fifths, but simple fact of the matter is 3-1 Pacers, and I have a hard time seeing how the Knicks are going to pull off 3 in a row with 2 of those having to be on Indiana turf.
I agree with that. One Nick question, then we'll get back out to the West here. There's a lot to like about this team, and they're probably a little bit ahead of schedule because Boston, I thought Boston would smoke them in 4 or 5, and I think if Tatum stays upright, Boston's probably playing Indiana, and Boston's probably going to the finals. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
So, look, the Knicks probably a little bit ahead of schedule, but when you look at what they need to do to take the next step, the splits with Cat and Jalen aren't good. I think Jalen has 1 assist to Cat in the conference finals. I think your guy, Timmy Goodtime Bontemps, dropped that. So let's just say that the Pacers are able to get this done in 6, or maybe they win at MSG tomorrow. What sort of tweak or movement do you think we'll see from the Knicks to try to take the next step? Because I don't think they can do it with this roster.
Well, and I would say the question there is not so much what tweak, but is there massive change? And I think when you're talking about massive, look, we don't know if Giannis is going to ask out, right? But if he does, there's going to be a lot of smoke about Giannis to the Knicks. That's certainly within the realm of possibility. I can tell you that people in Minnesota believe that the Knicks made the Cat trade as kind of a 1-2 step. They made that trade, yes, for this year, but also to have the option to trade him for a bigger fish. There's not a whole lot of bigger fish in the league, but Giannis would be one of them. So, that's again, there's a lot of dominoes that have to fall, or one major domino, I should say, would have to fall for that to be a possibility. But that's out in the air, at least.
All right, moving out to the West, before we get to tonight, I think Minnesota the other night beats probably, I don't know if they beat every team in the NBA with the way they were able to play, certainly offensively. I know Ant's taking a lot of criticism. Look, Julius Randle deserves a ton of credit for playing really quality basketball in the spring, something he has not done very much throughout his career. But the past couple of games, he's been watching from the bench in the fourth quarter. And I loved Windhorst, his hit on Van Pelt after the game when Dagnall was asked, hey, what did you learn about your team tonight? And he was like, nothing, just kind of who we are. It was like it encapsulated the entire thing. This, to me, is about an Oklahoma City team that is ready and is deep and is historic, on a number of different levels, as opposed to who Minnesota is not. But what were your takeaways courtside watching what I perceive to be a really good game from Minnesota, just not be enough to knock off this young upstart Thunder team?
Well, and I think the biggest thing that we learned is that, yes, Jalen Williams is ready for this. He is ready to be the number 2 guy on a championship team. They needed for him to have the best playoff performance of his career for them to win that game with a great shot-making performance by all the Timberwolves role players. And Jalen Williams, he answered the bell. So did Chet Holmgren. It sounds crazy because Shea had 49 and 10. But I didn't think Shea played great by his standards in that game. It was their number 2 and 3 guys. And then, look, Ant's going to get criticism. But Spence has been coaching his butt off to try to get him to make the right play, to try to get him not to force things, to try to get him not to play hero ball. They scored 126 points. They scored 41 points in the fourth quarter. Ant's Ant's lack of scoring in that game was not the reason that the Timberwolves lost the game. Now, you'd like to see him impact the game in other ways. You'd like to see him make more of a defensive impact. Okay, I'll listen to that, but let's not act like, Ant scoring whatever he finished with, what was it, 16 points, I think? Let's not act like that's the reason that the Wolves lost when they lit up the league's best defense, in large part because guys were getting great looks because the Thunder were selling out to stop Ant.
Yeah, when Dagnall did a really smart thing, he sits Hartenstein, he puts Chet at the 5, and then so what they're doing is throughout any action with Ant, whether it's on ball when he has the ball in his hands or off ball when he's trying to get open, Jalen Williams passes him off to Lou Dort. Lou Dort passes him off to SGA, who's 6'8". SGA passes him off to Alex Caruso or Cason Wallace. And then if he's able to get past the first line of defense, which he can't do because they're sending literally 2 people at him every time he puts the ball in the deck, Chet's back there at 7 feet just protecting the rim. So I get the conversation about the greats find a way to get it done no matter what the defensive scheme is, but I didn't have an issue with Ant's decision-making. He probably could have been a little bit more engaged off the ball to try to get open.
Right.
But when you are being handed off with 4 wings who are 6'5" and 6'8" and 220, 230 pounds, all designed to stop you, what are you supposed to do? Just force shots in double and triple teams every possession? It wasn't really about his individual performance. I think OKC is uniquely designed to stop Ant or anybody else individually when that's what they decide to do. And I thought that's what they did.
Yeah, and every time if there's a little crevice in the defense and he's driving, there's a second defender coming. And look, when you drive into the teeth of this defense, that's how you get a lot of turnovers. And, turnovers can just be death against OKC because they're so good at converting them. They actually weren't great at converting them in this game, but typically the teams had multiple games during these playoffs with 30-plus points off turnovers. They're scoring more points off turnovers in the playoffs than any team has since we've been able to track that stat. So, just forcing things, I don't know. You want Ant to just jack up a bunch of, hand and face, long jump shots. He was aggressive. Oh, great, he was aggressive. He went 7 of 25, and you lose by 25. Give me a break. Again, the whole point of offense is not for you to score as many points as possible. It's for your team to score as many points as possible. And a lot of those looks that Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dante DiVincenzo and Jaden McDaniels were getting was because it's a chain reaction for the attention that Ant's commanding. So look, when you're a superstar, when you're the face of the team and you lose in the playoffs, especially when there's only one game that night, there's going to be stuff that comes along with it, but a lot of this stuff's nonsense.
So give me your opinion on the Julius Randle experience, because like I said, we should not just completely summarily dismiss what he's done this spring because he has been better than he has been historically speaking. I don't know, man. For a few years, my buddies who I grew up with, they'd ask me, what do you think about the Knicks' chances? And my rebuttal was always okay, what do you think if Julius Randle is your legit number 2 next to Jalen? If you think he's ready, then maybe the Knicks have something, but he's never really shown to be that consistently, and he's watched from the bench over the past 2 fourth quarters. So what's fair to say about the Julius Randle angle here, Tim?
Yeah, and I'd say 2 of the past 3 fourth quarters, because in between there he did have a really good game. The really good games, really good performances have been the norm. And then, look, all the same stuff we just said about the attention they're paying to Ant, they're also paying that kind of attention to Julius Randle. And he's been a non-factor in 2 of the last 3 games, both losses for the Wolves. Can he be the number 2 guy in a championship team? It's hard to say that. About to get knocked out in the conference finals. Has Julius Randle's first season in Minnesota been a successful campaign? I would say absolute. I do think that he's proven a lot of things. Now, it'll be interesting. He's got that player option. I assume they'll work out something long term. I don't think he's a max player, but those negotiations will be interesting.
I have not spoken to you since the announcement was made that SGA was given the MVP award. As I referenced a number of different times, I get the Jokic side of this. I would get that vote. I have no problem with it. But now that it is official, has been for a few days, what are your thoughts on SGA receiving that award?
Yeah, I would say that I thought it was deserving. He earned it. They won 68 games. They were by far the best team in the league. I mean, he scored almost 33 games, leading the league in extremely efficient fashion. He filled up the box score. He played a significant role in the number one defensive team in the league. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Joker didn't have a case to win another MVP. You think I should basically 30 points for the Dodgers? To me, there's two major tiebreakers. One, team record, way on the side of SGA. Two, look, if it's a tie, I'm going with the guy who hadn't won it yet over the guy who's won three. So I didn't think it was a difficult vote. There were 1-2 on every single ballot. I think 71 had SGA 1. If I had a ballot, it would have been 72.
Brings us to tonight, where Oklahoma City is a very healthy 8.5-point favorite. Tip-off 6:30 Mountain Time. Is there anything you think Minnesota can do as far as tactical adjustment, lineup switch? Is there anything they can do to make this thing? And that is a tough building to play in. Do you give Minnesota at least a puncher's chance, and do you think we'll see something different from them to try to extend their season, or do you think it ends tonight?
Well, all those role players who were hitting shots these last couple games, they didn't hit shots in the first two games here. There's the old adage about role players shooting a lot better at home in the playoffs than on the road. If that trend continues tonight, then the Timberwolves can just, they don't need to fly back to Minnesota. They can go right on to Cancun. I don't know that there's major tactical adjustments. It'll be interesting to see what Finch does to try to get Ant freed up a little bit more, but I think the Timberwolves' hopes of extending the series rest in the hands of the shots of DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, Alexander Walker, Jaden McDaniels, those kind of guys.
All right. Oklahoma City, Indianapolis NBA Finals. You're equipped for it because you're a man of the people. You're a small market guy. Which media member will be complaining the most about having to travel between these two cities?
Oh, I don't want to call out names like Brian Windy Winters, but I will. No, he flies first class. He'll be all right. He just whines about sleep, not cities.
Fair enough. All right, my friend. Appreciate the time. Have a great week. Enjoy the game tonight, okay?
I appreciate you, brother.
All right, Tim McMahon covers the NBA for ESPN. He wrote a book about Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic and the Curse of Greatness was released in March, and the link to buy the book is up on his Twitter page at ESPN_McMahon is where you find him. Tim stops by today, courtesy of our good friends at IFA Country Store. Summer vacations and warmer weather are just beyond the horizon. As the days grow longer and brightly colored flowers begin making their appearance, it's time to start planning and applying Step 2 of IFA's 4+ annual lawn care program. Designed with a blend of vital macro and micronutrients, IFA's Step 2 fertilizer promotes strong roots and vibrant color in your yard at IFA and IFA.coop. So Oklahoma City trying to stamp their ticket tonight to go to the NBA Finals against the Minnesota Timberwolves in their building, meaning OKC's building. They are an 8.5-point favorite, so Vegas thinks this is probably not going to be a close game. We'll see how it plays out. And then, of course, we'll see if the Knicks can extend their series tomorrow at Madison Square Garden against the Indiana Pacers. As the NBA playoffs roll on, we are almost to the NBA Finals. Looks like it's going to be a battle of small markets. And as we've talked about, this is an era of NBA basketball where if you live in Milwaukee, you find Giannis, you can win a championship. If you live in Denver, you find a Jokic, you win a championship. And apparently you can build title teams in Indiana and Oklahoma City. This is a great time to be able to capitalize on the parity era of pro basketball in the NBA, and the Jazz are not ready for it, and it's a big-time bummer. All right, it's not just NBA playoff action going on, also NHL playoff action going on. So we're going to bring in Neil Smith coming up on the other side. The Utah Mammoth have made a couple of signings today. We'll tell you who they are and go over those details. RSL is in action tonight, taking on Austin on the road. Jason Christ will roll by later on. And the University of Utah football program welcomes in a bevy of 2026 recruits for campus visits coming up this weekend. Chris Camerani will stop by. We'll do some college football with CK on a Wednesday afternoon edition of The Drive. Good to have you with us. Keep it right here on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Big Dave is in town. My old man's in town. I don't know if he's listening. He's got meetings. But if he is, you just made him very happy. I was, you know what? I'll just say this. I was raised with too much Neil Young.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with Neil Young. But all things in moderation, and growing up in the household that I did, too much Neil Young, I'm not going to lie.
That's fair. Well, I mean, I've told you, my dad took me to like 20, maybe 30 Tesla concerts.
Indeed.
They're fine. Listen, they're fine.
Yeah, indeed.
But rest his soul. Dude, come on.
For sure.
Let's see a different show.
That's a lot of Tesla concerts. And Crosby, Stills, Nash in my household was only Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. So we'll welcome in another Neil Smith, on a Wednesday afternoon. Neil, is there music that you get nostalgic for that you were raised with when you were growing up?
Well, I just want to tell you, have you answer this question. Do you know where Neil Young is from originally?
Oh, I honestly don't. I'm in the Midwest somewhere, Ohio, because he wrote a great song called Ohio. I have no idea.
Same place Neil Smith is from, Toronto.
Oh, look at that. A couple of great Neils from Toronto.
And his dad was the sports editor for the Toronto newspaper.
Holy smokes. Good Neil Young knowledge, Neil Smith. I'm very impressed. So, my father, who's in town, he might be listening. So, hello, Dad. I was raised with copious amounts of Neil Young. I don't know if you know that about my dad. I think he might be his favorite.
Oh, well, see, he always likes a Neil in his life.
And a Canadian Neil at that.
Yeah, that's right.
So what music were you raised on? A young Neil Smith growing up in Toronto. What were you raised on?
Well, you're going to age me when I tell you, because I was around 8, 9 years old with the Beatles. And that was a craze like I've never seen before in my life, never probably will see again. Just total insanity. And I was right in there with it. I thought the Beatles were the greatest thing on earth. And, I remember my father, who departed when I was 10, but complaining about their long hair. And, of course, their hair now doesn't look long at all. It looks like just they haven't been to the barber for a week. But, no, the times were different there in the early 60s when the Beatles came over and performed on Ed Sullivan.
I love it, and I'm a huge Beatles guy, so impressed. What is it? It seems there's got to be something in the water up in Canada. The Canadians breed so many talented, like, comedians, musicians, actors. There's like this creative, artistic bug up there that seems to breed so many creative people. Why is that?
I don't know if that's true per capita. The United States breeds tons and tons of unbelievable talents too. But I really don't know why that would be. If it's per capita higher, I think maybe just that they have a lot of. They're not so worried about money when they're younger as Americans are, and because they're not as capitalistic there as in America. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Okay. Well, I'm just trying to pay Canadians a compliment, Neil, is all, on this this lovely Wednesday afternoon. I'll tell you what Canadians do breed, a bunch of great hockey players. However, for the first time since 1933, the United States wins the Hockey World Cup. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm a expert on the Hockey World Championships, but 4 Utah Mammoth players are now gold medal winners, including the captain of Team USA, Clayton Keller. So, like I said, this tournament on my radar this year because our local guys were so well represented. Is this a tournament that moves the needle for you? And what are your thoughts on Team USA winning it for the first time in 92 years?
Yeah, I'm just happy. They haven't won it since 1933. I don't quite understand why that's been, but Canada got knocked out, I think, by Denmark or something early in the tournament. And they had Sidney Crosby and the group of stars playing on that team. So I'm happy for the United States team, the American team. I'm happy for Tage Thompson, who scored the overtime winning goal, because he suffered through a number of years now with Buffalo and them not making the playoffs. And you know what? It's just good for those guys and good for the country, and will hopefully spur on other young athletes to want to be hockey players.
The landscape of the future of the sport. I mean, do the majority of the best young players still come from Canada? Has the United States closed the gap? Russia, when things are normal politically, of course, always in the conversation about one of the best hockey countries. So, just generally speaking, I'm not asking for specifics. The future of the sport lies where, Neil?
I think it lies all over the world, but Russia for sure, United States for sure, and the United States is closing the gap because, for example, Austin Matthews comes from Scottsdale, Arizona. You've got Clayton Keller coming from St. Louis, Missouri. They're coming from all over the place now. NHL players are talented guys, and that's because the sport has caught on a lot more now in the United States with the 32 teams being in the league. With the 1980 gold medal, I think was very big for kids, born in the 70s and 80s, and I think that the United States eventually will close the gap because there's 10 times the population in the United States that we have in Canada. So what's really good about it is they're everywhere is producing NHL players, and even there's one of the players. Jason Zucker, who played last year in Buffalo, he's from Las Vegas, of all things. So, they come from everywhere, and it's good to see.
All right, the Utah Mammoth signed a couple of 2023 first-rounders, Dmitry, I believe it's Samashev, and then Daniil Butt. I'm not going to ask you to break down who these players are because we don't know much about them, but it is transactionally a story around here. So 3-year entry-level contracts signed by two young players, a defenseman and a forward today. Just what is that? What exactly does that mean? What did Bill Armstrong do today?
He gave him 3-year entry-level contracts, which is good news for Bill and his staff and the fans because that means that anyway to this point that they were successful picks. Doesn't mean they're going to be stars. I've never seen the players myself, but what I do know that it means is that they like those players. They like the way they've developed, and they've started them on an NHL career, whether they have to start in the American League or they start in the NHL right away. Who knows? I certainly don't know, but signing young players is a good sign.
NHL draft coming up, the Utah Hockey Club with a 4th overall pick. I want to ask you about exactly who should they pick it for, because that's probably an exercise. You got to dig into a bunch of young prospects, and I continue to remind our market, and you're good to remind us too. We are a basketball market for basically 50 years, and we're used to the Jazz drafting a rookie who more often than not plays for the team right away. Now, they're not always ready to play right away, but we see them typically, certainly if they're a number 4 overall pick. The Jazz have a top 5 pick, and they badly need somebody to come in and play right away. So what's the, and you remind us, a lot of these young hockey players will not be playing for the senior club right away. Most of them don't for maybe a few years, if not longer. But when you have a top 5 pick, you have a good young team, you have cap space, what are some of the conversations happening with the Utah Mammoth front office right now in preparation for a draft that could bring them a really, really good young piece, or they could use that as an asset to expedite growth and bring in a vet?
Well, you've pretty well summed it up. If they got the 4th overall pick, it's 4, right? Not 5. It's 4th overall.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, they're going to get a good player. They're going to get a very good player. Whether he can play this year or not will be seen in training camp and judged by the coaching staff, I guess. But they're going to get a definite NHL player, and it should be a good NHL player. How good? Who knows? I mean, these players are 18. They play either in junior hockey or in a European league or in college, and it's a very hard barometer to use as to how they'll play when they get to the NHL level. I know that from talking to your dad for years that there's a lot easier comparison between college basketball and NBA, and you know which guys that play in college at a high level will be able to make it into the NBA. That's a little bit more up in the air when you're talking about hockey because there's so many different factors, and it's really hard to make that judgment. But the good news for the Mammoth fans is that Bill Armstrong and his scouting staff will definitely get a good player at number 4.
All right, I want to stick with a couple of off-season storylines before we get to the Final Four. Both series, every single series in either the NBA or the NHL, we find ourselves at 3-1, which is kind of a bummer for somebody that just wants to see some Game 7s and some exciting playoff hockey and basketball. Maybe we'll get there in the finals. But tell me about Mitch Marner, who is a center for the Maple Leafs, who is a free agent at the age of 28, and whether or not you think he is I know that he probably could pick his destination because of how highly thought of he is. But when you look at what the Mammoth need and who he is and the fact that he's a free agent, it's a name to talk about. Tell me about Mitch Marner, Neil.
Well, Mitch Marner is an excellent player. He's from Toronto and plays for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So there's a lot of pressure he felt by playing there. And he felt, according to my sources, that he had unfairly been criticized and judged in Toronto, his hometown. And I get that. I understand that. Maybe he wants to move on to a place where he's not so conspicuous that every time you go out for dinner, somebody's saying something to you, they're interrupting you or whatever. And that's what it's like in Toronto. He's very fast. He's not a big guy. He's I don't know his exact measurements, but he's not a big guy. He's slight, but he can play all special teams and a regular shift. So he kills penalties, plays a power play, and plays 5-on-5. He got over 100 points this year. So he's the real deal. He's probably best suited if he was on a Stanley Cup team to be the second line center, because you want to have a big, more powerful guy at first line center like Austin Matthews or Nate McKinnon or one of these big, strong guys. And then, you have a great second line centered by Mitch Marner. But he's definitely at the top of the free agent list, along with other guys like Brock Besser from Vancouver and a few others.
So according to Greg Wyshynski from ESPN, he lists 3 teams that make the most sense as far as making a play for Mitch Marner. And the teams he lists are the Anaheim Ducks, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Utah Mammoth. Bill's got a lot of cap space. He's got salary flexibility. He's got money to spend. Do you think Utah takes a look at Mitch Marner? And if they do, what do you think that looks like?
Well, I think, Spence, it's all going to be in the evaluation of Mitch Marner and where he wants to play. And when I say where, I don't mean geographically. I mean, is it really important to him that he's on a team that could win the Cup? Not maybe this year, but he can see them winning in a year or 2 or 3. Does he want to be on a team that's got Connor Bedard and rebuilding, and you may not make the playoffs next year again? That's a good question. Or is he in love with the city of Chicago? And with Utah, he'd put them over the top. I think he'd put them into the playoffs. He wouldn't be the final piece of the puzzle, though, because you're not that close. But he would definitely, I think, propel that team into the playoffs. But again, it's all going to depend on him. Does he want to live, first of all, in a different time zone than the Eastern time zone where he's always lived? Does he want to play for a contender? Does he want to play for a team that's middle of the road? Does he want to play for a rebuilding team and be the superstar of a rebuilding team? Again, that's all what's going on. Or does he just want to go for the most money, which I doubt. I really doubt that.
Put yourself in the shoes of Bill Armstrong, Neil, as somebody who has been a roster constructor at the highest levels in pro hockey. And let's say Bill calls, Mitch Marner, and he talks to his agent, and Mitch agrees to take a meeting with Bill and considers playing for the Utah Mammoth. What do you sell him as far as trying to get him to agree to play for this young group? Because we know that he's going to have a bevy of different options. What's kind of the selling point that Bill has in his back pocket for a player like Mitch Marner?
I think all teams now that are interested in the free agent market put together a recruitment presentation like college teams do when they're trying to recruit the best young guys out there, because they've got a choice to go where they want. So there would be a whole, I would imagine, video show. They'd bring him into Utah. They would show him how wonderful Salt Lake City is, all the opportunity that's there. They would show him the arena and how beautiful that is. They'd get him to meet some of the key players so that he knows that They're really good guys. Of course, the coach is going to play a big part in it, telling him what role he'll have on the team. It'll be a 2 or 3 day, visit where he'll stay in the best hotel. He'll go out for dinner with all the significant people, including Ryan Smith and his wife, and obviously Bill Armstrong, and obviously Coach Tornay. So they'll wine and dine him, so to speak, to try to sell him on why Salt Lake City would be a great destination for his career.
I want to ask you about a couple of other players before we get to the teams that are still playing. And, it's interesting because I first learned about Sam Bennett during the tournament where USA played Canada in the Four Nations, and he was fighting Brady Tkachuk. And ironically enough, Sam's teammate that he plays really well with is Matthew Tkachuk down in Florida. Now, they're still playing. Sam's 29. He is an unrestricted free agent. And he, it's not just his production, 25 goals, 26 assists. He also had 90 penalty minutes. And there were a lot of times I was watching the Utah Mammoth this year where I didn't feel like they had the fight, didn't feel like they had the grit, the physicality. So Florida probably wants to keep him. But if Sam Bennett decides to kick the tires on unrestricted free agency, does the Utah Mammoth make sense as far as a fit goes?
I think for sure. I don't know what teams Bennett wouldn't be a fit for because he's that good. He brings an element of nastiness to the team, along with Tkachuk, along with Brad Marchand. But he also is, from what I understand from Paul Maurice, is a great teammate. Is a guy that he loves coaching. Sam Bennett's worked with the younger players. I know that for a fact himself, and it's taken them under his wing. He seems to have all the credentials you'd want to be an integral part of the team. Again, he can play both ways. He can play very physical, but then he can score on you too. So he's one of those guys, Spence, that when he's on the other team, you hate him. And then when you get him on your team, you love him. It's one way or the other.
One more potential free agent, just looking at the list as far as what the the Utah Mammoth, what they need, what they could use, the money they have at their disposal, and then the ages of players available. Brock, I believe it's Bozer from Vancouver, right?
Besser. It's pronounced Besser.
Besser. Okay, so right wing, 28 years old, scored 40 goals a couple of years ago. Again, still young and a position of need for the hockey club. I don't know whether or not Vancouver wants him back. I'm reading now that he potentially could make his way to the Wild because he's a Minnesota native. And then the Hurricanes and the Devils mentioned his potential for Brock as well. But at the age of 28, young right winger, is this a player that could fit here in Salt Lake for the Utah Mammoth?
Yeah, and Brock Besser could fit on any team. It's unbelievable to me that Vancouver let this guy walk. I can't believe they didn't get him signed a year ago and wrap him up. He is a hell of a player. He's an ingredient that everybody needs. He can score goals. He's big. He's strong. He's not going back to Vancouver. He's said that already, and he's going somewhere else. Where that is, I wouldn't know. But whoever gets him is going to improve their hockey team by getting him.
All right. There are still teams playing hockey. So let's talk about these teams. Let's talk about these series. Both are 3-1. The Oilers were able to get it done at home again, where they have just been dynamic. 4-1. So they're up 3-1 now out here in the West Final. What do you make of the way Edmonton's been able to dominate through 4 games, and you give Dallas a fighting chance to get back in the thing?
Well, they really have dominated through all of the games in the series because if you remember Game 1, they had a lead of 3-1 going into the third period and allowed Dallas to score 5 goals in the third. So that's an anomaly. Why Edmonton is so dangerous, there's 3 reasons. They've got 2 franchise superstars in McDavid and Draisaitl who are playing at the top of their game. They're getting secondary scoring from their second, third, and fourth lines and defensemen. And Stuart Skinner, their goaltender, that was thought by many to maybe be their problem area that they could be, caught up with their goaltending. He has been phenomenal. So I don't give Dallas a chance now. I did before the series started, But when I see how Edmonton has turned it on, and I remember last year's movie when Edmonton suddenly got better and better as the playoffs went on. No, I'm sorry. I'd like to give my friend Peter DeBoer and Jim Nill, the GM, hope that they would come back in this series, but I don't see it.
All right, before I set you loose, let's move over to the East now, where Florida clearly has turned it on. Hurricanes were able to get one. Can they at least get it tonight, make it interesting, or do you feel like it's more or less over out here in the East?
You know, I don't know that Florida will win tonight. Although if you made me pick one team or the other, I'd say Florida's going to end it tonight. And the reason I'd say that is because the three guys that were out for them that are important pieces, which were AJ Greer, Mikko Mikkola, and Sam Reinhart, of course, those three didn't play in Game 4 in Florida. They're all playing for Florida tonight in Carolina. So I think Carolina's had their win. They've been a very strong home team all year, but boy, Florida is so good and has played so well against them, and they seem to be clicking really well. Bobrovsky's playing great in net. So again, I don't know that I wouldn't say Carolina can't win tonight, but I would bet on this thing ending tonight.
All right, before I set you loose, and we'll visit with you before the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs, but if it is Florida and Edmonton, what's the really early take? What's the really early gut feel on that series?
You know, I've been saying Florida since it was going to win since close to the end of the season. Yep. I said it last year. But you know what? Like, Edmonton scares me. Why I say scares my prediction. That's what it scares. It scares my prediction. And it scares me that they're playing for Canada now. Like, I mean, Canada hasn't had a Stanley Cup since '93 when Montreal beat the LA Kings. And they look really, really good. So, you know, I'm not sure how I'll swing my thing. I think it'll go 7 games. I think it'll be a series that it'll be just dynamic. And I guess I shouldn't be a Benedict Arnold and go back on my own pick, but I'll still go with Florida.
Fair enough. Neil, tell all of our listeners where they can go find that podcast of yours.
Well, we're doing it almost every day now, Spence. We're doing Stanley Cup dates after every game, and then we're doing the NHL wraparound show, which we actually just had Ken Holland, new GM of the LA Kings. He was on with us yesterday. It's on all the podcast platforms: Apple, Spotify, YouTube, iHeart. Anybody that's got a podcast platform has our podcast on it. We're growing. We had our most downloads in a month this month, and the month's not over yet. So it is growing. I hope people in Salt Lake City, if they're listening, will give it a listen and maybe subscribe. And I'm hoping that the people that do listen learn things.
Great stuff, Neil. I appreciate your time today. Keep up the great work, and we'll get you on soon, okay?
Hey, if you're going to see that basketball guy tonight, tell him hi from me.
I will for sure, Neil. Thank you, sir. Be well, okay?
Be well. Thank you.
All right. Coming up next, we will preview tonight's match. Yes, it is a game day for Real Salt Lake, a rare midweek game for RSL. Jason Christ will stop by. Chris Camerani live in studio for the 4 o'clock hour. There's a lot of college football news to get to. We'll do that with CK, who covers college football for The Athletic. But before we catch a break, we welcome in my guy, Jeff Fox from Pure Life Medical on a Wednesday. Jeff, happy Wednesday, sir. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm well. All right, so you guys at Pure Life Medical provide many services for people, but a big one is stem cell therapy. How does that work?
Yeah, this is amazing stuff. Stem cell therapy is like supercharging your body with the critical cells and components that help you heal. That really what makes your body work. And the therapy is to add those components that we lose when we age. And it can help us repair our injuries, increase our functionality, decrease pain. It can keep us out of surgery or help us recover faster from surgery.
Oh, that sounds great. So how does one know if they need or could benefit from stem cell therapy, Jeff?
Well, the cool thing about it is that almost everybody can benefit because it has such a wide range of applications. And so these include things like, if you have osteoarthritis or joint pain or even neuropathy, these are things that can really help. If you've got an athletic injury or been in surgery recently, this is something that can really help you. It can reduce discomfort and damage from chronic inflammatory diseases too, which is a big problem that people hear about. Some people like to use it just to slow down the aging because it helps us repair and stay young for longer. Other people may use it to help their brain function, especially if they've had trauma or degeneration in their brain. And then finally, some people just like to use it for aesthetics purposes. It can be used for things like facials or hair regrowth. And so if you really want to know for sure if it applies to you, though, we've got people with 50 years of experience that can really walk you through and answer all your questions.
Before I set you loose, how can our listeners go about getting a consultation with you guys at Pure Life Medical?
Yep, no problem. You can just schedule a free consultation with us by giving us a call at Pure Life Medical in Cottonwood Heights or in Layton, and just mention ESPN.
Okay, Jeff, thank you, sir. Be well.
You too.
All right, purelifemedical.com is the website. He referenced you can call them, but go get all their information at purelifemedical.com. Pure is spelled P-U-R. There's no E there. So P-U-R, lifemedical.com in Cottonwood Heights and in Layton. Appreciate Jeff's time today on this Wednesday afternoon. We'll catch a quick break, and we'll do some soccer coming up with Jason Christ, RSL Club legend, before Christopher Camerani live in studio for the 4 o'clock hour. Busy Wednesday drive, and it's good to have you along for the ride right here on ESPN 700. Doesn't it just always put you in a great mood? I mean, say what you want about UB40, but Wednesday afternoon, 80 degrees outside, and it's been a while since we've rocked in a UB40 on the program. I mean, instantly when you hear this, doesn't it improve your mood right away?
100%.
Yeah.
And not ironically. And I don't know what you were alluding to when you say what you want about UB40, but
well,
I'm on board.
No, I mean, there aren't many people that have the vulnerability to admit a band that is so summarily dismissed as their favorite of all time, and it's why I respect our next guest. He is RSL legend, club director, Jason Kreis, on a Wednesday afternoon. Hello, Jason. How are you, sir?
Hello, Spencer. That was quite the introduction. Quite the introduction. Thank you.
Well, am I wrong? I mean, are you not instantly in a better mood?
Yes, I am instantly in a better mood, and I was thinking perhaps the mood that brightens for you isn't about UB40, but in fact because you're going to be speaking to me next.
Well, you're one of my favorite people, which leads me to ask you, why have you not been on the program for at least 2 months? What gives?
You've got to be invited to be on here, I think. I'm not so certain that I have like a hotline I can call and get on, but if you want to open that availability, we could discuss.
Jason, you have a standing invitation to come in a studio for an hour at a time if you'd like, if you have the time for us. You know that.
Okay. Be careful what you ask for. That's all I'll say about that.
Fair enough. All right, let's start right here. As a man who made his living scoring goals in professional soccer, what gives as far as the lack of potency offensively? More or less, you had a couple of goals in the first few minutes against Vancouver, which was great. We'll get to that game. But, is it personnel? Is it scheme? Is it bad luck? Why the lack of consistent offensive potency from the club so far this year, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to one sort of major thing and another sort of underlying factor. I mean, the major thing is that we have yet to identify the replacement for a very important player that we lost last season in Chicho. And so we have looked under some rocks, let's say, and we have looked at some young players to potentially become that guy. And ultimately, we feel like nobody's really taken advantage of that opportunity that's been given them. So nobody is providing us the answers to the questions that we seek so far. So which leads us to be very clear about scouting an opportunity for this summer. But then I think there's an underlying factor in that we are missing some quality and consistency from the players underneath that striker position. And that really Diego Luna is the only one that has shown us any sort of consistency to his performances. And we need more than one player out of those players that are in essentially 4 positions to create some of those goal scoring chances.
We'll stick with what I perceive to be some positive developments before we dig into some things that I will call problematic. And, Jay, I think you've got something in this Gozo kid. I have not watched him grow the way you have. I've only seen him recently after Pablo decided he had earned some time with the senior team. And I don't know that I have a comp that comes to mind, but he's really energetic. He's very bright. He's obviously very young. He opened his bank account, soccer term, no big deal, soccer guy over here, last week by finding the back of the net. The same week he graduated high school. And part of me wants to say, sign a damn grown-up, please, but we'll get there. When you watch Gozo, and as you've watched him develop, what stands out most to you?
Yeah, he's a player that I've been paying particular attention to really since I came here now a year and a half ago, because he's been stand out in my eyes. He's been a difference maker in the teams that he's played with, and he shows some real raw, exciting abilities. And so he's a player that a lot of us in the club have been singing praises for and pushing towards, pushing the coaches to recognize and pay attention to him and work with him. And I think all of this has sort of come together here in the last couple of months. And he has certainly earned everything he's gotten. There's no doubt about it. He was not given anything. He has earned all the opportunities he's gotten, and he's somebody that's taking a hold of those opportunities and making the difference. So extremely excited about how he will continue to develop, because I still think he's, as you alluded to, he's shown some really bright spots, but there's also some pretty glaring improvement that needs to happen as he continues to develop.
Does he remind you of anybody? Like what type of player? And if it's not a name, I guess I could just ask it like this: what sort of player is he, and what sort of player do you envision him becoming once it's fully baked?
I think he's a player that is a guy that likes to run in behind, which is very rare in younger players. He understands that's his strength, is to try to receive the ball behind the opponent's back line, and then he needs to make plays happen. So he needs to get into these areas that we call primary assist zones and needs to make the right decision. That's a little bit where he's lacking. I think he's a tremendous finisher from what I've seen. High-level finisher, doesn't need a ton of chances to score his goals. So I think he kind of has that, and he's got an incredible aerobic capacity. And that bears out in the testing that we do, but it also bears out in some of the statistical data. The physical data that he's putting out is, frankly, record-breaking for our first team. So he's setting a new standard for that, for sure.
Okay. I wanted to stick with the positives. Cabral. He continues to play really well. And now there's some things we'll get to that haven't been great. But, you guys made some summer window additions last year that we'll talk about. I was curious during the offseason if you were going to figure something out in goal after an underwhelming campaign with McMath and Gavin still being very young. And, as far as being able to hang your hat on good decisions, I think it's safe to say that your keeper's been really good this year. Jay, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. He's probably, I would say, I don't even think it's arguable. He's been our best performer this season. Which is great. He really liked that. And I would say from a team building perspective, we have added a piece to what I would consider our core. And so that's a positive, and we need to continue to do that. But if you want to look at it from a little bit of a glass half empty perspective, it's never great when you feel like the goalkeeper is the best performer. You've probably got other issues that you need to talk about if the goalkeeper is the best player for you.
So is Diego gone yet? Has he left? Are you without Diego tonight?
No. He will go to national team camp after the LA Galaxy game.
Okay, so you have Diego for the next couple of games. Good to know. So let's move over here. I always try to be fair, and you know this because you know how fair I am as a human, how I give back, how I care, how I'm about leading with love. I don't have to convince you. So whether it's on air or off air, my whole goal every day is how can I help my fellow man and be fair. So I do not want to be unfair. So I'm going to ask the question like this. What is fair to say about Diogo, who's the only DP on your roster, and you brought him in last year, and I think a lot of people are just waiting to see it work. And I know he's picked up a little bit of a knock, and I know there's some things going on with him off the pitch that you can allude to if you'd like. But the way I'll ask the question is, what's fair to say about Diogo?
I think it's very fair to say that he has not produced in this time here what we had hoped for or expected out of the acquisition of him. I would say that doesn't mean that it's been all bad, because I do think that there was a moment at the beginning of the season and in the preseason where I thought things were heading in an extremely positive direction. But ultimately right now, where it sits right now is, I think everybody's disappointed, including him, by the way. He probably more so than all of us has been disappointed with his performance. He's very critical of himself as a person. And so, it just kind of is what it is. And this happens in professional sports. This is never a zero-sum game, I think is the way they say it, or 100% business. We're going to make mistakes. So this may prove to be a mistake. We'll see.
What's the status of his health? Is he available for the road trip?
He has been left off of the road trip due to disciplinary reasons.
Due to disciplinary reasons?
Mm-hmm.
Can you shed any light? That has not been announced. Can you shed any light onto why this decision came down?
It came down basically because his behavior in the training sessions is not up to a Real Salt Lake player standards.
Okay, so breaking news. Diogo Gonçalves not on the 2-game road trip due to disciplinary reasons handed down by the club. Hard-hitting journalism on this little radio program on a Wednesday afternoon, no big deal. All right, so who steps into that slot? Who ultimately is going to be tasked with trying to play alongside Diego and hopefully helping him out a little bit?
Well, I think in the last game, everybody saw that Gozo played in his position, and the tactics essentially changed a bit. So now it looks a lot more like we're playing with two strikers, which I think proved effective in the first two goals. To have the numbers of players that are involved in the finishing attack phase and are entering the penalty box to finish those attacks is higher. So we were quite happy with that and quite interested to see it play out a little bit longer.
Okay, so we've discussed the attempts you made during the primary transfer window to bring players over. The Bosniak kid, I think that's how you say his name. That obviously didn't work, and the situation with his club was untenable, so we know all that. So let's talk about the acquisitions you did make and what you've seen so far. And we'll start with Willie Agata, who has 3 starts and 5 games played, and we're still waiting for a goal from our guy. So, of course, the pea-brain soccer part of me is just waiting for him to score. Are you seeing anything that is positive outside of the fact that he has not found the back of the net yet?
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's been some things that he's done for the team in his hold-up play and his physical presence that has absolutely helped us. I think he's a player. Any striker that comes into a new system is going to take time. They have to understand exactly how and where and when they're going to get their goal-scoring chances. I don't feel like he's a player that has had, 6 or 8 chances and just not taken them. Some of his best chances were actually called off due to somebody else being in an offside position. But there's goals in this player. He has scored goals for Kansas City. This isn't like a player that has never scored goals in MLS, and we're just kind of rolling the dice. This is a player that has some history doing it, so we believe that there's more there, and I think it could be one for in the category of striker just needing a little bit of luck in that sort of category, and one goal comes, and maybe the floodbank's open.
We've only seen Johnny Russell once, 15 minutes off the bench. And look, we should probably set expectations. I think you probably played against him. He is not a young player. There we go. There was the laugh I was waiting for. And he hasn't been with the club for a number of different months. So what can you tell us about the process to get him involved? And do you think we'll see him more moving forward? And also, what's reasonable to really expect, Jay?
Yeah, this is a really difficult situation because, when you're not in a team since November and you kind of go into the off season with an injury, it leaves you in a position where you've got to get soccer fitness. So it's one thing to do the physical fitness testing, which he did, and he scored very well. So from aerobic capacity, it's there. But from a soccer playing perspective, it involves so much more than just, doing a beep test. And so he's got to be built in a smart way. And we are trying to manage through that. I actually think he will be one that will gain a big, big bump in his fitness and his readiness when we have this international break coming up.
Is he on the trip? Is he available? Is he on the trip?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to Diego for a moment. Okay. So clearly his star continues to just shoot through the roof. And as you referenced, after this 2-game roadie, he will exit and he will play with the U.S. men's national team in the Gold Cup. Let me ask you this question before we get to how it pertains to your club. Gold Cup appearances, can you remember Kyle and Nick and even Tony, before they were national team regulars? If I remember correctly, their U.S. men's national team experience started with a really successful run in the Gold Cup. I can remember Kyle scoring a couple goals, Nicky playing really well. Could this be a conduit to a regular rotational spot for Diego with the senior U.S. men's national team, and maybe enough to get him potentially with the U.S. men's national team so we could see him play in a World Cup?
Yes, without a doubt. And so, coaches that get to work with international players, there's such small windows oftentimes. And then on top of that, you play in what's called friendlies. And so coaches and players, tend to be a bit more relaxed in those games. So you don't oftentimes get the full view of what a player is capable of until they're in a tournament like this, a major international tournament that lasts several weeks. So now you have all of the on-field data that you will need in a competitive environment where there's a trophy on the line and money on the line. And you also have the social data that you will need when you are in and amongst players for 2 to 3 to 4 weeks And so I think that this is a major opportunity for not just Diego, but for all of the players that are part of this Gold Cup roster. The one other interesting part of the way U.S. soccer and the Gold Cup mix is that typically, because it's during the summer, most of the big name players playing in big European clubs opt out of this tournament, essentially. So it allows opportunity for others to step forward.
All right, so Pablo hopped on the show last week and dropped a little bit of a, I'll call it a bombshell. I was a little bit surprised to hear him say it. We talked to Kurt about it a couple days after Pablo's hit, because it's clear that there is interest in Diego, and as he continues to grow and evolve, there will be extreme interest in Diego. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that you guys would never sell him, because if you get a phone call from a legitimate team in a league overseas that wants to pay you a grip of money, I understand why proof of concept means that you'd probably take it. But Pablo said last week the new ownership group has informed him and you guys that they're no longer interested in this ethos of developing young players and selling them for a premium. The new ownership group has expressed, according to Pablo, that they're interested in developing young players and keeping them here to build a team. Can you shed a little light on what would be a very new mindset for Real Salt Lake?
Yeah, I would first say that I listened to the interview last week, Spence, and I would say that Pablo was probably a little extreme in his take of the messaging that we are receiving, because, and I'm sure Kurt probably already did this with you, because it's never going to be an absolute, right? I mean, we can't make promises and say that we're never going to do this. We're going to keep these players, because ultimately we have to make the best decision for the team. What I would say is that I think the new group of majority ownership is a little bit more interested in this idea of consistency, and of keeping players that are really important to us, putting a higher premium on them than perhaps before. And so now, if you want to look at it just from a purely financial perspective, Diego's value to us may be higher than we are willing to sell for. And part of that value is not just based upon Diego's abilities, but based upon our longer term view of how we are going to have a chance to win.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And first of all, thank you for listening. I know you're a huge fan. Appreciate the years. And look, I mean, I don't want to ask you for a number, because I don't know that a number exists where you're like, all right, if we surpass this many million, then we make the decision. But let's dig into the nuts and bolts of what a decision like that entails. Because the fact of the matter is, right now, when you look at the production of the club, Diego with 8 goals and 3 assists, and then there are 5 players with a goal, and then I have as many goals as the third place goal scorer on your roster, okay? So Diego is carrying a massive, massive load. And it's tough to imagine, even though the start has been hard and the points have been tough to come by, without his contributions, it's tough to imagine where you guys would be. But at the same time, to your point, there is a certain threshold that would be met that would make this decision very hard to say no to. So what goes into your decision-making process as to whether or not you hold on to him or you move off of him?
Well, I think you start with what I just described, which is essentially, what is the value for us of Diego Luna? And you don't just consider right now. You have to consider replacement value. You have to consider the relative franchise value that could be going up significantly if we win something, or if we're consistently competing for championships. The value of the franchise goes way up. So it's a big math problem. But then also, let's not forget that there's a player involved here, right? And this is oftentimes where most people, including even us, tend to forget. But what Diego wants is ultimately going to be important as well, because if he ends up, let's say, for instance, we want to keep him forever. Well, that's not in his plans. He at some point wants to become an internationally elite level player. Well, then we have to consider that as well. So there's just a lot of things that go into the decision. It's not simple.
Would be interested to follow up with the thought of where his head is at, because he seems like a really nice kid. He seems like a player that appreciates Pablo and appreciates the club. There are moments, Jay, if I'm honest, where I'm watching games and he appears to be frustrated that he is not receiving the help around him that he needs. Where is his head at right now? Do you sense any frustration from him because he's been so bright, but you guys aren't winning games? Do you sense that he is 10 toes on the ground, as they say, and he wants to be here? Can you shed some light on where Diego's head might be at right now?
I would be remiss probably to try to interpret all of that, Spence. I can only tell you the narrow part of the answer that I could give you is that I think Diego does a really, really good job of focusing on what's exactly in front of him and allowing the rest to kind of play itself out. And so I think what's exactly in front of Diego is a game tonight that he's very focused on and will give his maximum effort, a game on Saturday, which he will do the same. And then this opportunity he has with the national team. And so I would say his head is very focused on what's in front of him and where it needs to be, which is just focus on his performance and let the rest go. The only other longer term perspective that I would guess at would be he wants to be included in that World Cup roster, which is only a year away. And so he needs to probably navigate how best to keep the attention of the coaching staff from that. And so, would I, if I was Diego, I would be weighing that up pretty severely about making sure that I'm playing on a weekly basis, because this coaching staff has made no bones about it that the players that will be considered and selected for the national team need to be playing for their team every week.
Do you have an opinion on whether or not it is better or worse to be an MLS player trying to make this World Cup roster? Can you be properly prepared to play at the highest level in the world playing in MLS, or like a lot of these other players that are with the U.S. national team? Do you think it's preferable to be overseas in a bigger league?
I think every player has a different pathway. And let's just start with this. Let's start with how I just answered the last question. I think it's very critically important that they play every week. Meaning, like, a player goes to Europe to a huge club, doesn't ever play. Well, in my eyes and in my opinion, and I think it's shown and borne out by what our national team coach is saying right now, that's not good enough. We need you to be playing. And I think in order to have the best chance to succeed as a player, you can't just be sitting on the bench somewhere and come into an international tournament and think that you're going to be at your best. That doesn't exist. So I'm not sure I answered your question, but I maybe I did. For me, maybe the level, whether it's England, Germany, Belgium, Italy, or the MLS, is less critical than just the fact that you're playing every week.
All right, let's move over here. Bill Simmons has this theory he calls the Patrick Ewing theory. It is a pro basketball theory based on the 1999 New York Knicks. When Ewing was hurt, they somehow, some way came together and played better than anybody thought the group could without their best player, and they made the NBA Finals. What are you hoping to see, and specific names if you could, as Diego departs for at least a month and a half, if not more, if the team goes on to perform well in the Gold Cup? Who on this roster are you looking at to say, okay, Diego's gone, it's your time? How do you tread water without by far your best player?
First of all, I think the maximum he will be gone is 1 month.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so there's no month and a half categorization there, thankfully.
10-4.
So who do we expect or want to step up is the guys that have yet to really get big opportunities. We will hope for the continued development of Gozo. We will hope that Willie Ugata reaches a level where he feels comfortable and starts to score goals. We will hope that Tyler Wolf's contributions are more and better. We will hope Lachlan Brook will have opportunity. We have Johnny Russell, who has yet to really break in, who has shown a history of really good play in MLS in the attacking half of the field. We will have another young player named Aiden Hezrikani, who has done extremely well for the Monarchs, should get more opportunity, and there's no reason why he can't take advantage of it the same way that Gozo has done. So there are players that will need to step up, and the efforts of the players that are the core of this team will need to step up as well.
Last question, Jay. I'll set you loose on this. If you take the pulse of RSL fans right now, and if you read some of the media coverage, both locally and nationally, there are a lot of people pointing fingers as far as the inability to bring in the reinforcements that you needed to bring in after letting go of Chicho and Crooks and Andres and Anderson. And you know the list, okay? And last year was record-breaking goal scoring and the points accumulated in a single season. What is fair to say, once again, going back to trying to be fair, as far as what is the inability to find the reinforcements to keep up the level that you had last year? What's fair to say about the club's inability up to this point to find the proper replacements for the players that you let go?
It's fair to say that we need to take an internal review of some of these things and processes. I think it's fair to say that we haven't. I don't think we have operated at the level that we have in prior times. When you start to add up the signings of Ojeda, Palacio, Gomez, Chicho, these players, something was different about the process because we haven't knocked it out of the park in the last 12 months. And I think it's really quite simple the way I look at it. And perhaps this is oversimplification, but the beginning half of last year, we had two difference makers. We had Chicho and we had Andres Gomez. Now, of course, we had a third there in Diego Luna, who was chipping in, right? This season, we don't have those two difference makers. We just have Diego. And so I think that we still have the core of a very, very good team. We just need those two difference makers. And perhaps, I know that we missed on one that we thought we had an opportunity to get in the winter transfer window. We just missed it, couldn't get it done. But I think we also need to be thinking about that secondary player as well.
All right, my guy. Well, enjoy Austin. Behave yourself. Travel safe, and good luck tonight, okay?
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Jason Christ, club director. I think that's his current title. RSL legend. Real Salt Lake in action tonight against Austin on the road. Austin is not good this year, but neither is RSL. Austin 5-6-4, 10 goals scored. Wow, that's bad. That's the worst in the West. Look at that. 17 goals allowed, -7. They are 3-2-3 at home. RSL at this juncture is 2-5-1 away from home. Austin on 19 points, RSL on 14. In case you're just tuning in, Jason with a little breaking news. Diogo Gonçalves has been left home for the match tonight and the match on Saturday due to disciplinary reasons. So we'll see if we can get more information. Jay stops by today, courtesy of our friends at Cortland Roofing. Re-roofing and roof repair experts with over 20 years of experience, family-owned and operated. Call Cortland Roofing today to get free rain gutters with any roof replacement. Great time because you save a grip of money. Give them a call at 801-615-5560, 801-615-5560, 801-615-5560, or online at cortlandroofing.com. All right, we got 2 hours down. We have 2 hours to go. Christopher Kamrani, the legend himself, CK, joins us live in studio. Coming up next, right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, we definitely have hit our UB40 quota for the day. Two is the limit.
2 songs?
2 is the limit. We can't do any more. Look,
That's it?
I wouldn't say this to Jason because I don't want to hurt his feelings. UB40 sucks.
Wow.
They're not good.
Wow.
And isn't this an Elvis Presley song? It's a cover. It's a
Technically,
UB40
yeah.
cover.
It is a cover.
All right.
But, maybe we'll get another 2 or 3 songs into.
No, we've hit our quota. I know once you land on a band, you don't like to sway during the show. But we can move on. Maybe we'll let CK pick a bum coming up next.
He actually picked this one,
Okay.
just to be clear.
All right. UB40 in honor of Jason Christ. Chris Camerani's live in studio. All right, Christopher, I need your immediate reaction. RSL has one designated player. His name is Diogo. Is my dog about to hump you?
He's currently chasing his tail.
Okay.
But he's eyeing my right leg.
Just let him know. Just tell him to sit. If you want to witness CK trying to avoid being humped by my dog, it's on YouTube. Duke is a little bit of a humper, so we're trying to work with him on that. So Diogo Gonçalves, the only designated player on RSL's roster, has been left home for this 2-game road trip due to disciplinary reasons. That's all we know. We just found out last segment. What are your thoughts?
It makes me think that, and I'm not accusing RSL of fabricating any sort of injury report, but the heel injury the day before last Saturday's game.
Correct, yeah.
The timing is kind of, in retrospect, maybe a little too striking. Listen, you're not going to get more from RSL. Good for Jason for telling you, and good that it's out there because now there's, it's a club mandated statement from a club mandated employee. But this to me is a potential pathway down no longer being RSL's number 10.
I would agree with that.
Sometimes signings don't work out, and sometimes high-profile signings don't work out. And Diogo isn't exactly the type of high-profile signing that's worth potential headaches that apparently is being given at the moment. I think he has 1 goal this year. Don't remember how many he had last year. Maybe
he had 1 last year.
1 or 2. So, sometimes you have to call a spade, and with the upcoming summer transfer window, sometimes it might be better for you to shake hands, give bones, dap each other up, and say good luck. I could be wrong. Maybe this is a step in a direction where Diogo and the coaching staff and the front office have stuff to settle through. But if you were asking me to read the tea leaves out in Sandy across from the old Mayan, I would say it seems like we are trending in that potential direction.
Did they close the Mayan?
Oh, a long time ago.
Food was never very good.
Food was never good, but the guys dove off the rocks.
The divers were impressive. The burritos just were ass. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised that they closed it. All right, so Diego Luna is about to leave for the U.S. men's national team to play in the Gold Cup. He will be playing tonight. He'll be playing on Saturday in Los Angeles. Then he's gone. Pablo, on the show last week, I know you heard it because you listened to all of it, he dropped a bit of a bomb, and he said he has been informed by ownership that they're no longer interested in the develop young players, sell them. He's been told that if we develop a young player that's good for the group, they want the player to stay here. Does that mean RSL will never sell another player again? No, it does not. If some team in La Liga called Kurt tomorrow and said 40 mil for Diego, I understand that it doesn't mean they're never going to sell players. But what do you make of what Pablo and the front office have expressed, that maybe this new ownership group is not interested in the mindset that previous ownership groups have had?
Well, I think we need to challenge the ethos that this franchise is at the level of some other franchises in MLS. They're not. They sold Andres Gomez last year, and they sold Fidel Barajas. Other than that, there haven't been bank-breaking sales really ever. The RSL's front office had a lot to do in the last 24 months, both bringing in players and selling players. But before that, there wasn't that much going on from a development and sell point of view. They've developed players that have come to the first team, Justin Glad, Aaron Herrera, Bodie Hidalgo, mainly defenders.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not like they are. I mean, there are other clubs in this league that have signed players or developed them from an academy perspective and sold them for a lot of money. Columbus Crew, Philadelphia Union, LA Galaxy, so on and so forth. So I'm not necessarily surprised because Diego Luna is the type of player that you currently can't afford to lose. Because if you lose Diego Luna, you lose the fan base. And yes, if there is a $40 million tag that comes, yes, you sell. I think fans would understand that, but it's not going to.
Mm-hmm.
Diego Luna isn't going to be sold for more than Andres Gomez.
You don't think so?
I don't think so.
Oh, interesting.
No, his player profile is different. Andres is a true burner, pure winger, like one of the fastest dudes in the league when he was here, like was a fringe Colombian national team player. Now, Diego has a chance to play at the World Cup for the U.S. when the U.S. is pretty stacked from an attacking point of view, but he plays a different position. His style of play is a little more unique. Body type's a little more unique. He's not exactly a guy that can – now, he has foot skills, but he's not the type of guy that's going to be able to run away from a lot of people. But if Diego ends this year with 20 goals, maybe we're having a different conversation. I just don't see it. And I think it makes sense from the Millers' perspective that if Diego continues to play at this level and go like on an upward trajectory, you make him a designated player because he's proven that he can do it. And you need somebody to build around, and they just don't have anybody else.
Feels like he's already on the level of what a DP should be, right? I mean, isn't that fair?
Yeah, he's at that level. I would imagine that from a locker room perspective, he's not the captain, but he's a guy that people rally around. He's an easy guy to rally around. People like playing with him. People like watching him play. Mauricio Pochettino's giving him a chance where the previous staff did not. And for that is always going to be one of the more idiotic type of moves that we'll never understand why he wasn't even in Paris. But yeah, he's been playing like a designated player, and he's been the only guy that's been doing that since they jettisoned the likes of Chicho and Andres.
So where do you if Diego develops fully and meets his ceiling? Because to your point,
are we doing comps? Doing TJ comps?
No, I actually want to know what sort of level you think he can play at, because he's never going to be a burner. He's never going to be a burner. The Javier comps feel right to me. Because they're really similar. And Javier was a guy that was able to make a difference with his skill, but was never a burner. Javier probably better with free kicks than Diego.
Yes.
Javier hit some incredible free kicks. So if Diego has the desire, and he does, he actually has said it on this show, his goal is to be a European player. What league? If he maximizes who you think he can be, what league do you think he could play in and play well in?
I think he could easily transition to one of the top clubs in Mexico.
Okay.
Which is saying a lot because, top tier Mexican club teams are very good.
Mm-hmm.
If he wanted to, I could see him going down to Argentina or Brazil. Now, granted, those have really good club teams, but not at the level of Europe. Europe's tough because mainly every single league is prioritizes the NFL bigger, faster, stronger model. Like, you want dudes who can run really fast, who can jump really high, who can run away from you and have a crazy amount of talent on the ball. Diego's a little undersized. And, I know in soccer we're not talking about guys that need to be 6'2", 6'3", especially that position. Lionel Messi's the greatest player of all time, and he's 5'8".
Right.
Which is, I think, what Diego is. But he'd have to go into the right system. Could see him easily starring in a league like the Netherlands. I think going to top flight, England, Spain, Italy, these are all pretty tough asks.
France as well.
I think, are all pretty tough asks. But I think for Diego, it's going to come down to, if he wants to go to Europe, does he want to be, a potential first-team player or rotational player on a team like PSV or, a team that's one of the best teams in, let's say, the Netherlands, or more obscure leagues like Belgium where you can get a sniff of the Champions League? Or does it make sense to make a lot more money in MLS, play often, as Jason was saying, the previous hit? A lot of these guys get tantalized with the prospect of going to Europe for obvious reasons. It's where you want to go if you have a chance. but it is so cutthroat. And listen, I mean, like look at the stats around Andres Gomez. Like he is a 80 to 85th minute sub on a middle of the table team in France.
Yeah.
Whereas here he was one of the best players in the league.
Mm-hmm.
So the step up is pretty hefty, but Diego could potentially face that, crossroads, but I think RSL will make it hard for him to want to leave.
One more thing here. I don't do radio like this, and I have an understanding of how organizations work and how roster construction works in pro sports. So I feel like it's a simp.
Who we blame in Spence?
Well, I feel like it's a simp thing to do, to talk about someone has to be blamed, because it's more complicated than that. This is not a linear finger-pointing situation. It's more complicated than that. The ownership transition is a real thing. And with the way MLS is set up with a single entity, it's also misguided to add up the dollars that RSL received in exchange for players they jettisoned and then draw a straight line and say invest that amount into more players. It's also very fair to say there has been a failure on some level to at least bring in talent and economic investment to continue the momentum you built last year for a team that scored more goals than any team in RSL history and had more points than any team in RSL history. Obviously, the playoff failure is what it is. So instead of saying, is it Dave Blitzer? Is it Kurt Schmidt?
It's everyone's fault.
What's fair to say?
You win as a team, you lose as a team, starting from the players to the staff to the front office to the ownership. Everything is tied together. It is a organic mass that moves intertwined together. Listen, they simply have missed on a lot of players, and they've missed on a lot of players while working with a tight budget, and that's always going to be hard. You want to miss big. RSL hasn't missed big. They've missed small. Missed small with Diogo. Missed small. I don't want to say it's a miss, but a guy like Dom Mark-Zook is not Andres Gomez.
Mm-hmm.
Like these were moves that were broadcast as potential replacements, not Band-Aids, which at the time they were, and they still are. They're still Band-Aids. Eventually you're going to have to rip the Band-Aid off, and I don't know how RSL's roster is going to be constructed going forward, specifically with the Millers in charge. But it would behoove them to spend money, and it would behoove them to spend more than a $3 million transfer on a number 10, because $3 million number 10s don't really exist anymore. Like, you spent $3 million on a guy who is a rotational player in the middle of the field with like Brian Ojeda and Emeka Eneli. I know that sounds crazy, but you can't really ball on a budget anymore.
Nope.
You can't.
Nope.
And,
no, you can't.
And I know fans will always want to support and show out, but sooner or later there's going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back. And like we've talked about, RSL is floundering. The Royals are, I think, the worst team in NWSL. They have some decent players, but just pay for good players, bring in good players, and everything else will handle itself. I've been saying this, like 90% of what fans want to see is just good players, either in person or on the tube. That's it.
100%. And it is the only way to do this. You have to write checks. There has to be economic investment into the talent on your roster, which leads us to the final thing. Then we'll catch a break and we'll do some college football coming up next. Summer transfer window will open in July.
Got it.
And there are 13 matches. Starting with the first week of the window opening, if they act that week, that gives them 13 matches. If they wait until the end of the window, I think it gives them 8. So, look, here's my thing.
Let's hear it.
The primary window came and went, and you blew it. You just blew it. And you tried to save it with a bench player from Sporting KC and a dude that played against, like, Dunseth. You tried to save it. And our guy, Big Willie Goals, my guy, not looking great. Johnny's played once for 15 minutes. Jason just basically said, like, he's not close to soccer shape, which is understandable. He wasn't with the club for 7 months. So because you blew it during the primary transfer window, you should have targets ready that as soon as you can, when that window opens, get it done. Don't wait for the window to close and do it the day before. As of Jason's interview last segment, I now have Pablo, Kurt, and Jason on the record saying the same thing. Their belief is, or what they're saying out loud publicly, is they're 2 dynamic attacking players away from being among the best teams in MLS. I have no idea if that's the case.
In addition to Diego.
Yes,
okay.
Correct. So if that's the case, 2 dynamic attacking players, summer transfer window, and don't make it $2 million guys. Like, go make a splash, get 2 $7-8 million attacking players. Is that enough to salvage something this year?
No,
it's not.
I think the season's lost, especially considering you're losing Diego for potentially 2 months. Let's hope he stays healthy and he balls with the national team and continues to impress that coaching staff. But I mean, in what world has this iteration of RSL convinced anybody that they can, tread water on their own without Diego Luna? I mean, it's just you watch them play and they have like two basic attacking maneuvers. They will overload the right side, or they will get it to the left foot of Alex Catranas, who will send it across to nobody.
And Alex has some decent potential to serve balls in. Yeah.
But for whatever reason, there is nobody crashing the box, no late runners. They lack for any sort of idea. But I think they know they're limited. I think this is a club that understands its limitations and they're learning them in real time. But I'm with you wholeheartedly. I think if the Millers really want to show the fan base that they mean business, I think you need to be willing to spend, not this window, because this window's kind of tough because you're not going to potentially get your exact targets, but you still can. I think in my opinion, in the next 2 transfer windows, they need to be willing to spend anywhere from $12 to $18 million on players.
I agree. And just real quick, to your point about whether or not they can do it this window, I don't pretend to know my elbow from my rear end about primary transfer summer window, who's available, who's not. But if you go off of past, player signings, last year with a primary transfer window, they didn't do much. And it was the summer transfer window where they bring in Dom.
They sold Andres, too.
So they bring in Diogo, Dom, and Lachlan.
Your guy.
So, look, I'm not saying high five for bringing in players that aren't very good, but they did make more signings in the summer last year than they did in the primary last year.
Correct. They did. And it seems like last year they had their ducks in a row in terms of understanding that a potentially big offer, one that they couldn't turn down, was coming for Andres, which it did.
Mm-hmm.
And then they went out and signed players. But Diogo, Lachlan, and Dom probably cost a total of like $4.5 million between 3 players, $5 million, which
not going to get it done.
Nope.
When did they bring in Alex? Was Alex a primary transfer window, or was he a summer transfer window?
No, I think he was before the start of last season.
Before the start of last season, okay. Because, that was a good signing. I think Alex has been good. But you're not wrong. We need to write some checks. All right, before we catch a break, you can cash in on the basketball playoffs with Prize Picks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court to your Prize Picks lineup, whether it's points, rebounds, or assists. You can take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash today. Turn your playoff hot takes into tickets to basketball's championship series, starting with the play-in round. Every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you into the Take-Two ticket sweepstakes, which can get you and a +1 a VIP trip to the ship. So here's what you do. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700. They're just going to hook you up with $50 free when you play your first $5 lineup. Don't even have to win that $5 lineup. You still get the 50. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 for a free $50 with our good friends at Prize Picks. They are giving you a free square tonight. It is more on Anthony Edwards, 0.5 points. I'll take more on Alex Caruso, 5.5 rebounds and assists. Give me more on Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 9.5 points. I will take less on Chet Holmgren, 5.5 defensive rebounds. And I'll go more on Alex Caruso, 8.5 points tonight. So Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Before we catch a break, we welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. Give him a call at 801-424-DISH, where you can save a bunch of money on a bunch of different things. What's going on, Ryan?
Spence, thanks so much. This is an exciting promotion right now. It is so awesome because Not only do we have a 2-year promotion of credits and the price is guaranteed, but we're also throwing in 3 months of the full service for free. Guys, this is a awesome promotion because you get 3 months free. And on the larger packages, this is worth about $400. If you take the bigger package, you'll get install for free. We'll throw in movie channels, plus we'll get you the award-winning hopper. Guys, the DVR that Dish has put together, there's nothing like it. It's bigger, it's faster, it auto-records the locals, it'll auto-hop commercial breaks, the entire thing. No other provider offers that. Plus, you have access to all your content no matter where you go. And we'll also set you up with dinner at JCW. So call us up today. Take advantage of this deal. Why it's still around. This is the opportunity you're looking for. And if you're overpaying with cable or DirecTV, this is money in the bank, and you're going to love the service. Call us 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
There he is, Ryan from the Dish Pros. More with CK live in studio. We'll do some college football. 94 days away. So stay tuned on ESPN 700. Christopher Comrade, CK. Does anyone ever call you Christopher? I mean, that's your proper name, correct?
Yeah, it's on my birth certificate.
Okay.
Sometimes.
Parents?
No. It's always been Chris or CK. It's weird.
Okay.
But weirdly, I choose to go by Christopher on my byline.
I saw that.
Yeah.
And I think at one point I tried to take credit for CK, but did you say who initially came up with the CK?
That's been going on since I was 10 years old.
Okay.
Because I used to think it was cool that Calvin Klein had jeans.
It is kind of cool.
It is kind of cool.
Back to the Future style.
I'm not going to complain. That's
Calvin
right.
Klein's.
That's right.
Back in the day. Shout out Michael J. Fox. All right, Chris, you were in Midtown Manhattan not too long ago.
Yeah.
For the Athletic College Football Annual Meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Any grand takeaways you'd like to share with our I mean, look, the landscape of college football right now is wild. I mean, CBS is reporting that the SEC is leaving the NCAA in 2029. You can't just do that, so there are a lot of things that have to take place. Conversations about the new CFP format where it's clearly the SEC and the Big Ten calling all the shots, and you can complain about it all you want. That's kind of the landscape of the thing. So what were some of the college football stories, topics bantied about by some of the heaviest hitters in college football media?
Exactly that. It's be on guard, be prepared for rampant change once again. And ironically enough, just within the last 6 days since I've been home, the SEC meetings have taken place, and Greg Sankey and folks are unhappy with the state of college athletics, apparently, and they can throw their weight around because they want to and because they can. Also, the seating is officially changed. That I think that happened like 2 days after I got home, which I think is ultimately the right decision to do away with those, bloated higher seeds. But I think what I would say would be that you just have to be prepared for a tremendous amount of change and be prepared to ride the coattails of the powers that be. And those powers that be are the two heavy hitters that you mentioned, the SEC and the Big Ten. And listen, things change all the time. I mean, once upon a time, people were mad that the NBA had a best-of-5 series in the first round. And I know it's hard to compare that to the amount of teams in the college football playoff, but things change, man. Like Major League Baseball used to have, I think, one wild card team, and that was it. Things change. Everything is not going to be as it always was, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, thank God we're no longer dealing with that computer system known as the BCS. Like, I think a lot of people are just operating either publicly or privately in fear that they're going to be left behind when the dust settles. But I don't think it's going to get to that level. Now it can. Now if CBS's report is correct that the SEC is going to go rogue and call its own shots in 4 years, I guess we'll have to tackle that beast when it cross that bridge. But I just think it makes sense for everybody to remain in lockstep because that's where all the money is.
So Ross Dellinger, who does a really good job for Yahoo, and also Matt Brown, friend of the show, Extra Points, I kind of read what those two write and follow them as a North Star when it comes to some of the legislation in place. Tennessee passed a law without really telling everybody, like any school in our state does not have to adhere to the House v. NCAA settlement guidelines, like you're exempt. And then the P4 conferences drafted a contract that said, no, actually, you're not allowed to follow your state law if you want to be part of our lunch table. The Trump White House came up with a college football commission that they were going to solve everything. The White House was like, you're not doing that, so now that's on pause. Kind of like the tariffs, like here are the tariffs. Wait, no, the tariffs are not that. No, they are that. Now we're going to roll this back.
Nick Saban was supposed to be the face of it. And
right.
Even he was like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right, exactly. So there was a conversation going on that the White House was going to get involved. Now that's not happening because that's kind of the deal, walking everything back. But when it comes to the P4 conferences and their desire to make sure that all of their member institutions do follow whatever the House v. NCAA settlement says versus the state passing laws saying that you do not have to do that. How do we traverse that? Like who's right? Who's like ultimately if you're Vanderbilt, if you're the University of Tennessee and you have legislation in place from your state leaders saying you don't have to follow any of that, But then there's the Peak Four conferences drafting the contract to say, if you want to be part of us, you have to sign this and you do have to follow it. All of this feels like we're just in for more legislation and we're in for more legal battles. And the lawyers are the ones that ultimately are going to be the winners here.
Correct. You're going to be dealing with things that are pseudo-passed, tied up in court, file motions, injunctions, and all of these all of these court legal mumbo-jumbo jargons that everyone has had to either relearn or learn for the first time again. There will be loopholes. I mean, don't forget that, just as recently as March Madness, the state of West Virginia was threatening to sue the NCAA because West Virginia was left out of the NCAA tournament. I think a lot of it is grandstanding. I think a lot of it is going to be filled with ways around these motions and these bylaws and these laws. I think ultimately it will boil down to games won't be disrupted. I don't think roster construction will be altered all that significantly until that day comes. Maybe Tennessee and Vandy do get a leg up significantly. I don't necessarily see that being the case because I think at the end of the day, you're likely to be more emboldened to side with your governing conference body as opposed to some state legislators that you don't really know, but it could be wrong. So we've approached it's silly season without a doubt, and everybody is, in my opinion, just kind of bloviating.
Well, and also, Chris, where I've kind of landed, and I don't know this to be true, and maybe we need congressional involvement. Maybe we need the highest office of the land to try to get involved here. And I guess that was the idea before everybody else. I guess Cody Campbell, the Texas Tech booster, was involved in addition to Saban, as you referenced. When Campbell was announced as somebody who was going to kind of co-chair the thing, a lot of people pumped the brakes like, wait, we don't know that we want this dude involved because conflict of interest with Texas Tech. And then the White House that surrounds Donald Trump basically said, we cannot get involved with this, and that's why they paused it. So maybe because it is so convoluted and complex, we do need the highest office of the land to get involved to just have some sort of final solution. But where I've kind of landed is that I don't see a solution on the horizon. I don't see the dust settling anytime soon, maybe in 4 or 5 years, but it feels like we have entered and are still in and will remain in this space of ambiguity with the sport. And you just kind of have to deal with it day by day and year by year, and the chaos will continue.
Yeah, you basically took the words out of my mouth, man. This is until there is a hard and fast rule book, until there are ways to punish people for, mistakes or missteps or misgivings, people are just going to be able to operate the way they want to because there is no governing body. I don't know if it's necessarily something that needs to be congressional or even, involving the executive branch of government. You just need to get people to come together and agree on something. Mm-hmm. But everybody's best interests are going to be served, and those are generally involving their own.
Right.
And it sounds really depressing to say, but if you're speaking from a pure business perspective, it doesn't make sense to punt on your best interests in it for the sake of other people. And, and the SEC and especially the SEC can just basically flex its chest.
Right. And the other thing that maybe people have either forgotten or they never knew is the ability to enforce rules was stripped from the NCAA. Mm-hmm. They were thrown out of court hey, you're a serial antitrust violator. And also, you're no longer able to even enforce the rules that you have in place. So when you hear an announcement like the SEC leaving the NCAA, and look, it's 2025, that's 4 years down the line, none of that is surprising. I feel like that's where we've been going all along. But as we continue to traverse into this new space, the chasm that exists between the SEC and the Big Ten and even the Big 12 and the ACC continues to widen. Because the SEC and the Big Ten, they have the cards. They have the ace in the hole. And we can complain about it as a Big 12 market about what's fair or what's not fair. But this has turned into a game of leverage, and I think it's clear that certainly the SEC, probably first and foremost, but the Big Ten alongside of them, they are holding the cards. And Brett Yormark can negotiate all he wants, but if you want to be part of wherever they're going, you're probably just going to have to follow whatever they say. Is that fair?
Yeah, and you mentioned Brett Yormark. It's going to be interesting to see what he says during the Big 12 meetings this week, because these conferences never lack for these official, unofficial meetings. The SEC had theirs, the Big Ten had theirs. Now it's the Big 12's turn. I'm sure he'll be asked ad nauseum about all of this stuff. But we live in a capitalistic society, and whoever gets, you know the rule, man. The man with the gold makes the rules. Number one rule of the drive. So the SEC, the Big Ten get the biggest amount of dollars because they get the most eyeballs, and the media contracts are the fattest for them because most people watch them. And it is an interesting kind of dichotomy if you think about like professional sports compared to college sports. Professional sports, for the most part, are always driven by really high-profile urban markets. College is like basically the complete opposite. Like, how is it that a place like as remote as Tuscaloosa, or Starkville can play a role in these multi-billion-dollar media rights deals? It's because people will watch them, and people will at the end of the day pay more attention to them because they have more history, more success, and that is the reality of the situation. And you mentioned the chasm, like the Big 12 just doesn't have any established, Goliath. They have a bunch of, maybe it's a little low-hanging fruit to say a bunch of Davids, but like they don't have anybody that's going to be like, they have Deion Sanders, but other than that, like is anybody busting down the door to watch Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham? Is anybody busting down the door to watch Kyle Whittingham and Utah? BYU's a little unique in that, like, they have the historic contract with ESPN and, the very big, Mormon population worldwide, but it's who you're marketing, and these other conferences just have they have so much more at their disposal compared to anyone else.
Did the Pac-12 and the ACC once upon a time announce like an alliance? Am I remember that correctly?
The Big Ten was involved in that too, yeah, and it lasted like 2 weeks.
So that's right. And the press release, like, we are committed moving. And no, you're not.
Yeah.
It's still so wild. I was watching Pacers-Knicks last night. They referenced that Benedict Mathurin was the Pac-12 Player of the Year. And I just started thinking, like, when he was at Arizona.
Okay.
And I just started thinking, in 10 or 15 years, when you bring up the Pac-12, the youngs are going to be like, what the hell is the Pac-12?
Well, the Pac-12 will be Wazoo, Oregon State, some of these new guys.
Yeah, but like what it was.
The real, yeah.
Like a home for West Coast football.
Correct.
And it doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
If you're Brett Yormark, are you considering engaging with the ACC about potentially trying to put something together there to put a contingency in place in the event that the SEC and the Big Ten say, we are taking our ball and we are going home and you're not allowed to come with us? Because that appears to be on the table, Chris.
Yeah, I think you would need two member institutions who are very prickly at their own conference in the moment, in Clemson and Florida State, to be willing to be front-facing and forward and being like, yes, we're all for this, because those are two institutions who have recently either publicly or privately threatened that they may want to no longer be part of the ACC. So the heaviest hitters have the most sway, and I think you can easily make an argument that between the Big 12 and the ACC, Clemson and Florida State, and even Miami would probably be third. And like the Big 12 just doesn't really have anybody. So I think it would make sense, but it would be fascinating to talk to these guys and just be like, why don't you guys all just like sit down, in a room, like just sort it out, come to some sort of common ground. But egos are real. The amount of money on the table is very real. It just seems like, and maybe I'm an optimist beneath this endless pile of cynicism.
Breaking news: Christopher Kamrani, optimist.
It seems like it's doable. Am I being a little naive?
Well, here's where I land on that dynamic. Negotiations are about one thing: Always.
Power.
No.
Dang it.
Leverage.
Okay.
Okay. So write this down, kids. Take out the pen. Okay. Negotiations are about one thing. It's leverage.
Do you think kids have pens?
Take out the iPad. Take out the iPad. Type this in. Snapchat it or TikTok it.
There you go.
Negotiations are about leverage. They just are. And if it's your own life and if it's your own job and if you want to go to your boss and negotiate a new compensation package, you better have tangible data about the value you provide to your company, or you better have a job offer that you can say, okay, I'm getting paid 25% more over here. If you want to keep me, you have to match that. So negotiations are about leverage, and the leverage resides with the SEC and the Big Ten. It just does. So when it comes to their inability to land in a space where an agreement could be found, it's the ACC and the Big 12 complaining about the concessions they're not getting from the SEC and the Big Ten, but it's the SEC and the Big Ten saying, we don't need to give you these concessions because we have the leverage. So where's the middle ground ultimately? And right now, the one example we do have that's tangible is the expanded 16-team CFP for next year, 2026, the next cycle, which, as we know right now, the proposal is 4 auto bids for the SEC and the Big Ten, 2 auto bids for the Big 12 and the ACC, 1 auto bid for the group of 6 now, shout out New Pac-12, and then 3 at-large bids. The reports are the Big 12 and the ACC aren't happy with that because of the auto bids that the SEC and the Big 10 are receiving. But if you're the Big 12 and the ACC, I think you have to understand the leverage lies with them, and you might just have to agree to that. Say you get half the auto bids, we'll take 2. We just want to sit at your lunch table.
I think that's very accurate, and I think that's fair. I think until the Big 12 finds a way to establish itself with the powers that be, they don't have any leverage. That's great. It's a good learning lesson, leverage.
There we go.
I have a question. How much does the rise of SEC basketball add to their already deep war chest?
Yeah.
Because it used to be the ACC.
Sure.
The Big 12 historically, Big East,
Rest in peace. Yep.
But now it's like, I think the SEC had the most amount of tournament teams.
They did. It was the best conference in college basketball. Yeah.
So I wonder, as a big college hoops guy,
indeed,
how much does that add to their already strengthened war chest?
I don't, and you know this, I don't think it adds much to it, only because even though college basketball is viable due to March Madness, it's still a drop in the bucket compared to college football.
Yeah.
I mean, it can't hurt it, but it's the reason why Brett Yormark was interested in adding UConn to the Big 12. UConn football is pathetic, but UConn basketball is one of the top 2 or 3 blue bloods in the country. They are a beneficial, tangible asset to your conference because of their basketball team, not their football program. But Duke, Carolina football is better than it used to be, but there are only a handful of basketball front-facing programs that really make sense that would help your conference. You want it to be attached to an excellent football team. It's why Brian Santiago, when he was introduced as the BYU athletic director, was very front-facing, that football drives us, even though their economic investment is in their basketball program, right?
Yeah.
So, look, BYU basketball is going to be a top 5 team this year. A.J. DeBonsa right away probably will be the best player that's ever played in our state, due respect to Van Horn and Andre and everybody else. Like, A.J. is different. But if they don't invest with Kalani and his group the way they've invested with Kevin and his group, yeah, it's awesome that you have a great basketball program, but do you want to be UConn? No, you want to be Bama. You want to be Florida. You just won the national championship.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because you have kind of a clean slate. You have an opportunity to take hold of this geographical footprint where currently it's kind of Oregon and everybody else, like SC paying Lincoln Riley King's ransom clearly isn't worked out. Washington has to figure out, who they are after, losing Kalen DeBoer. But the possibilities are out there. You can establish yourself as a geographical giant. Now it's difficult because you have to be able to win those recruiting battles out west, and you have to stave off all of these guys in the SEC and Big Ten who are coming for the players in your state. But it is a great point that the likes of these programs in the Big 12 have the opportunity to seize the moment. Carpe diem.
Indeed.
Fortune favors the bold.
Yes, it does.
Shout out JP.
Yes, it does.
Just don't know if anybody's good enough or if the pockets are deep enough to do it.
Since you brought up SC, the reports are SC Notre Dame is going away. It's not done.
Very bad.
So, look, BYU Utah will be preserved because they're conference buds.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we were already in a space where it went away incrementally and could have gone away entirely if they didn't land in the same conference. College football, to me, one of the things that does separate it from the NFL is rivalries. We have some good NFL rivalries, but there's something different about college football rivalries. Is it time to change that paradigm, though? Is it time to get rid of any romantic idea of what college football is based off of how rapidly it's all changed? Because if you're Lincoln Riley, like, why would you schedule that game if it's going to get in the way of you winning your conference and maybe making the expanded team? I get the counterpoint, right?
Yeah, but this goes back to the moving target of change we talked about. Like how I guess the if this theoretical 16-team tournament exists, then your auto bids are your auto bids,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe your strength of schedule isn't getting measured the way it historically has, and all these things. But I mean, like, there's a reason why locally that game is awesome every year. Like last year, on paper, that game had no reason being as good as it was. It was, and we've talked about this over and over for the last 20 years. The one game that my wife still remembers and still talks about is the kick six with Auburn and Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's the only time I've seen her like actually freak out during a sporting event.
Yeah.
Watching that guy return that attempted field goal. Like, if that's Auburn and Vandy, if it's Auburn and Iowa State, does it resonate?
No, it does not.
I mean, and I think honestly, the rivalries are why we'll even bring in the casuals. They will bring in the likes of you and I. We will probably, if we're free, we'll tune in for the Iron Bowl.
Sure.
Catch quarter.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not really that intrigued by the idea of SC and whoever, SC and Texas A&M. I mean, that's too good of an example.
No, I understand the premise and the point. One more thing here, then we'll set you loose. Duke is looking at me like, dude, I got to go. And I am one dog dump in the studio away from never being allowed to bring him in again, so we're going to get Duke outside and go to the bathroom. You always hear this moniker, and I use it too, but I think it's different when you look at what has transpired in college football and what could transpire in football. You always hear the same thing. Well, regardless of all the chaos, Saturdays in the fall still feel like Saturdays in the fall. They don't if you're an Oregon State fan. Mm-hmm. They don't if you're a Washington State fan. They don't if you're one of these teams that have been left behind. And if we continue to move into a space where it's simply capitalism, economic investment, and anyone who's in that group don't need to make concessions for anybody else, and we'll just use the SEC and the Big Ten. And if they decide that they're going to go do their thing, and period, end of story, that's it. There will be more schools where Saturdays in the fall no longer feel like Saturdays in the fall. You can make an argument that for Utah fans, that for a decade plus welcomed in Oregon and USC and UCLA and the big Pac-12 brands, and suddenly that's gone. And due respect, it's now Iowa State and K-State and Baylor and Brand, like good solid programs, but not the brands that we're accustomed. You can make an argument that Saturdays in the fall around here don't feel like Saturdays in the fall like they did a couple of years ago, and they don't for Washington State, they don't for Oregon State. Where I think this sport could find itself in peril is if Saturdays in the fall no longer feel like Saturdays in the fall for the majority of college football fan bases, and they just feel like it for the SEC and the Big Ten.
Saturdays in the fall need to force parents to make their kids miss their soccer games for games. They need to make them miss scheduled events because of the importance of what it means, either in person, at the tailgate, in the stadium, or even on the tube.
Yep.
After the news broke that the Pac-12 was dissolving, I was actually sent, I don't know if you remember this, I went and it was Thanksgiving weekend. I went to both the Civil War and the Apple Cup in 24 hours. And talking to those fans that have been left behind, it is a stark reminder that people, just because they might have, gone to a different school, they might have different colors, their diploma might say something different, that shouldn't negate, their ability to, have the money that they invest in their alma maters or the schools that they support, have it potentially pay off. And you're right. Like we are rapidly trending towards a world which we leave people and schools behind, and I don't think we can afford to do that.
Great to see you, my man.
Get Duke outside.
I will. And then you're in charge of the flyer for Falk's birthday. I want that. You got 24 hours.
I got you.
All right, let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Pros. Save a bunch of money on a bunch of things. 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
Yes, this is the opportunity you've been waiting for. Listen, did you get that oversized Dish bill or, DirecTV bill or cable bill? Switch to Dish right now. Get 3 months of your service free, plus a new promotion, which is going to save you a minimum of $30 a month. Guys, this will add up into thousands of dollars just for one simple phone call. Take the upgrade, get the biggest, fastest DVR out there, the auto hop commercials, auto record your games, plus you get access to all the streaming apps built into the system. And guys, we've got fantastic internet options for prices from $35 to $50 a month for internet. I know a ton of you are going, wait, what? I'm spending $70, $100, $105 a month. Call us up, lower your bill, save money on your TV, your internet, and even your mobile phone. Call 424-DISH. Call now, 801-424-DISH.
All right, 5 o'clock hour of the program is next right here on ESPN 700. Lost internet. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time, Wednesday afternoon style, 6 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. It has been a beautiful weather week here in Salt Lake. It's a nice day today. A little cloudy this afternoon, but about 80 degrees earlier. Sunshine here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's good to have you along for the ride. Your commute home on a Wednesday afternoon starts right now. You are halfway through your work week. You're one day closer to the weekend. Happy Wednesday to you. Spence Checketts behind the mic. This is The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. Of course, Porter Larson along for the ride today, producing and booking the program. We're going to go live to Oklahoma City, get a preview of tonight's Timberwolves Thunder game. Oklahoma City is looking to advance to the NBA Finals for the first time since 2012. They're an 8.5-point favorite tonight. Over the Minnesota Timberwolves. Minnesota trying to stay alive. We'll do some NBA playoffs with Tim McMahon live in Oklahoma City. We are only a few weeks away from the NBA draft, so we'll see if Tim has any intel on the mindset of the Utah Jazz, who have the 5th pick, and they have the 21st pick as of now. Seems like every time somebody writes a draft primer or an offseason primer in the world of pro basketball, the Jazz are mentioned rather prominently as a team that could get involved with some transactions. We'll have to wait and see. The 5 o'clock hour today is brought to you by our good friends at Advanced Windows, where you can get $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. Local Salt Lake company operated by our guy Nate Orchard, who is the reigning mayor of Sac Lake City, the all-time Utah single-season sack record holder. Played 8 years in the NFL. He and his buddy Jake Weber run the company. They are excellent people. They both are great family people. This is a family-owned business that's been around for basically 40 years. They care about our community. Now, here's the deal. The temperatures are about to skyrocket. It's going to be a really warm week, unseasonably warm, and we'll have a little bit of a cool down next week. But then, you know the deal, summer is here. And if you don't have the type of windows you need, if you have older windows, if you've thought about getting them replaced, you are just hemorrhaging money because the house gets warm. What do you have to do? You have to jack up the AC, then your power bill goes through the roof. And with Advanced Window products, you can save $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more right now. Now, if you're potentially selling a home coming up in the fall, you can wait. But if you call today and get on the schedule, you do lock in the savings of $2,500 off when you buy 10 windows or more. So here's the deal. Give them a call today, Advanced Window Products at 801-850-9100. That's 801-850-9100, or you can visit advancedwindows.com to save $2,500 when you buy 10 windows or more. All right. Western Conference Finals tonight. Minnesota trying to stay alive, taking on Oklahoma City at the Paycom Center in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Oklahoma City, an 8.5-point favorite. Not sure that we're going to see very many adjustments from Chris Finch at this point. Just kind of have to dance with who brought you, as the old saying goes. Teams are who they are this time of year. Last night, the New York Knicks were beaten by the Indiana Pacers, 130-121. And barring something that is very, very rare, teams coming back from 3-1, we find ourselves with an NBA Finals matchup featuring two teams that play in cities that are kind of like ours. Oklahoma City and Indianapolis, two smaller markets on the landscape of professional sports. Of course, Indianapolis has professional football, and they're a bigger market than we are. Not by much, but they're a bigger market than we are. We are technically a bigger market than Oklahoma City. And so we'll see if the Knicks or and even the Timberwolves in Minneapolis, Minnesota, not necessarily New York, Chicago, LA, what have you, Miami. And we have entered this era of parity in pro basketball. We're about to crown our 7th different NBA champ in a 7-year span, which is something that has never happened before. The new collective bargaining agreement is very punitive in nature when it comes to big spenders. And the motivation there is to even the playing field. As Adam Silver has talked about, he does not want Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green on the same team. Does not want the best players in the NBA teaming up and therefore creating super teams and dynasties. And that was the motivation for Adam Silver and the powers that be on the NBA owners side of things, in conjunction with collectively bargaining with the players' union and association to create the new ecosystem of pro basketball, where teams like Milwaukee can win a championship if you find a Giannis. Teams like the Denver Nuggets can win a championship if you find a Nikola Jokic. Indianapolis is an interesting case study, and oftentimes throughout the course of the NBA season, when I discuss certain NBA teams, I try to do it through the prism of what the Utah Jazz can do to get back to respectability and a competitive level that is exciting for fans, because it's been 3 years now. We're about to enter our 4th year of no man's land of Jazz basketball, where they're just not relevant at all on any national stage. They're not close to being competitive. Even if they got the number 1 overall pick this year in Cooper Flagg, it would not have put them on a competitive nature. It would have put them on a better track. But when you look at how Indiana has kind of gone about their business of building their team, they do not have a guy that was a number 1 overall pick. They do not have a guy that was even a top 3 or 4 pick. They really knocked it out of the park with Tyrese Halliburton, who had a historic NBA playoff offensive game last night with 32 points, 15 assists, 12 rebounds, 4 steals, and maybe most impressively, in 38 minutes of being your lead guard, offensive initiator, decision maker, he had 0 turnovers. It has never happened before. Halliburton was a late lottery pick. He was not a top 3 or 5 pick. A lot of teams, including the Knicks, passed on Tyrese Halliburton. Pascal Siakam, once upon a time, was an all-star in Toronto, but Indiana was able to be opportunistic after building a good young team, drafting smartly, making some good trades, developing players like Aaron Nesmith, who was drafted, by the way, by the Boston Celtics and Danny Ainge. He just could not get off the bench. Miles Turner's kind of Mr. Pacer. He's been there forever. But players like Andrew Nembhard, players like T.J. McConnell, Ben Shepherd, Benedict Mathurin, these were kind of throwaways, passed over by a number of different teams. And so if you're a Jazz fan looking for a model, Indiana is actually not a bad one to look at. The problem is you have to draft well, and you have to get the right players, and you have to develop them the right way. Jazz have not drafted well since this new ownership change. The Jazz have not drafted well since the new front office change. They just haven't. Some of the better players they've found, they've drafted later. The top 10 picks they've had at this point, 0 for 2. I'm not saying I'm dismissing either Taylor Hendricks or Cody Williams. Taylor, of course, got hurt. We need to give him space to get healthy and improve. Cody was just horrific as a rookie. There's no other way to put that, but he's a kid. Let's see if he can evolve. There just isn't data available to indicate the Jazz have drafted well, while Indianapolis clearly did, and they were able to make some trades. They turned Domo Sabonis into Tyrese Halliburton. The Sacramento Kings move off of him. Sabonis is a good player, but Halliburton is a game changer. And then when you have these young players that show some growth, and you have a championship coach like Rick Carlisle, you can expedite your growth. In a way, the Jazz did this with the Mike Conley trade, as Dennis Lindsay executed that to help the Mitchell-Gobert group evolve with a vet. And then Indianapolis is opportunistic when Toronto wants to yard sale because they don't believe Pascal Siakam or OG Anunoby, ironically enough, was going to work with Scotty Barnes, and they felt like they were done, so they decided to move on. Pascal Siakam's a really good player. All-star once upon a time, perfect complement to Tyrese Halliburton. And Indiana, in a very small market, in a place where not a lot of players desire to play as far as free agency goes, they built a team that's on the precipice of going to the NBA Finals. So has the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, Sam Presti might be the best in the business, but you have to look at some of the success stories for teams that are in smaller markets that once upon a time were rebuilding the way the Utah Jazz have in order to figure out, is this a model that Zanuck and Ainge and the decision makers over there that they can follow? There are some similarities with the Oklahoma City Thunder project and what the Jazz have kind of taken on. Difference is Oklahoma City was able to turn Paul George into, first of all, a bevy of assets, but first and foremost, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Okay, so the Jazz move on from their superstar, Donovan Mitchell, and Lowry's really good. Larry Markkanen's a player that would start for most teams in pro basketball, would play for every team in pro basketball. He is not a franchise cornerstone. He is not an elite player that you can build around as the guy. He just isn't. He's not a star player in the NBA. He's been an all-star once. A few years back, first year here in Salt Lake when he was playing next to grown-ups like Mike Conley, like Kelly Olynyk, some of the players, that Malik Beasley. The Jazz actually had some grown-ups that knew how to play basketball then, and Lowry had a really good year, was named an all-star. And this is not an anti-Lowry marketing diatribe. Lowry's very good. That's why you max him out. He's not close to SGA. And what Sam Presti was able to do with Paul George was just simply more value than what the Jazz were able to do with Donovan Mitchell. And maybe that's not entirely fair. Paul George in his prime, probably a bigger and better player than Donovan is. And then as a result of being able to get all those assets, what Sam Presti and his staff were able to do is draft again, like Indiana was able to do, just draft really well. And then find some diamonds in the rough. Lou Dort was not drafted. They turned one of their high draft picks into Alex Caruso, who was also not drafted. And Caruso's played really well for them. They draft well with Jalen Williams. And ultimately they surround their franchise piece in SGA with great players. And they did bottom out. That's why they got a top 3 pick, and they used that on Chet, who's been, of course, incredible. But this is an era in the NBA, and we have proof in front of us, where you do not have to be in South Beach, where LeBron wants to join up with D-Wade and Chris Bosh. You do not have to be in Los Angeles, even though it helps because the Lakers have always been able to reset with stars, just like they did with Luka. If you're smart about your process, and if you evaluate talent correctly, and if you have the right staff in place to develop that talent, what Adam Silver's NBA has provided are teams that play in cities like Oklahoma City and Milwaukee and Denver and Indianapolis, that are now winning NBA championships. The new CBA expires in 5 years. Jazz are on the clock because there are a lot of pushback from people in the league that believe the new CBA was too much of an overcorrection. And if over the next 4 or 5 years before the CBA expires in 2030, the Jazz continue to tread water, they may have missed the best opportunity that a team in Salt Lake City has ever had to build a championship contending team. We'll go live to Oklahoma City coming up next with Tim McMahon, so keep it right here on a Wednesday Drive on ESPN 700. All right, wrapping it up for a Wednesday edition of the program, halfway through your work week, one day closer to the weekend. Is this Phil Collins? Is that who this is?
It's Prince.
Prince, same thing. You know what? I have an admission to make. This is a rare one. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I think I'm wrong about Prince. I like my music taste. I like my music takes. I've never been a big Prince guy, and a lot of people who I respect that love music have taken me to task and believe Prince is a genius. None of his stuff ever really resonated with me.
I'm kind of with you. I don't dislike Prince. Obviously, I just played him on the radio. I think he's got some decent songs. I think it's more about the performance. I think it's more about the character than it is like the musical genius with Prince. Not that he's not like there's not good songs, or if that is your like preferred type of music, it's not, terrible. I can listen to a Prince song, but it's not like I don't think the quality of music that would get you to the stardom that Prince has without the character, without the performer, without the aura that Prince has.
The only real Prince knowledge I have are the great Chappelle skits, where he's like, shoot the J, shoot it.
And would he, like, legitimately asking, would he have that stardom without those skits, without, like, the character assistance of his friends in Hollywood? Like, that's part of Prince as well. That's not discounting from him.
And see, it sounded like that song, Studio, the Phil Collins song that was in American Psycho, the Christian Bale movie.
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like.
A little bit.
All right, what do you think about tonight? Of course I want the Knicks to get back into it because it's just been so fun watching Knick playoff basketball in a way that I haven't in like 25 years. I would really like Minnesota and New York to extend these series. Do you think, man, OKC, when their building is really lit, it reminds me of the Delta Center.
Mm-hmm.
Reminds me of like Jazz playoff basketball. They're so good at home. Do you give Minnesota a Mike Tyson uppercut chance tonight?
That was kind of the Prince thing, by the way, Minneapolis.
I like it. Okay, gotcha.
Because I'm hoping for the same thing. I just want to see 7 games. I want to see a competitive series. I kind of feel like Oklahoma City closes out tonight. But I'm with you. I'm cheering for the alternative. I'd like to see a competitive game, a competitive series, but I just think that Minnesota is kind of battling uphill right now. And if you got the Julius Randle that you saw at certain parts of the season and, early postseason, then yeah, you probably have a chance, but I think that is less likely than not. Now, that's the beautiful part about basketball, man. Minnesota has a roster that if they're on, if the shots are falling, they can beat anyone any given night. So do they have a chance? Absolutely. Do I think SGA, MVP, and OKC advance tonight? I kind of do. That's the way I'm leaning.
Yeah, I'm probably with you. And by the way, I don't think I fully realized how corny Oklahoma City is.
They're stars, their team.
Corny group of dudes.
They're young. They're like, they're this generation of kids who kind of lean into, as you were talking about, like they have that commercial. I think they're all on TikTok and whatnot. There's a little bit of that. Where like post game, the interview, there's some stuff that feels a little contrived. There's stuff like that with Donovan. Karl Anthony Towns does it. Jason Tatum really bad with some of that stuff where it seems like you're like thinking about what people are going to tweet while you're being interviewed. And to me, like, whatever, do your thing.
Fair enough.
Is that wrong?
No. I mean, look, I'm old. I don't understand people.
I'm with you.
Well, like the Stephon Diggs stuff. Don't video everything you're doing and release it to the masses. Like it's only going to come back to bite you. And I don't love the whole like performance kind of everything feels staged. Yeah. Everything is performative. I feel like all of politics is performative now. I feel like all of life is about filming everything you're doing. I don't need to watch you make a turkey sandwich. And yes, I have my free agency to turn the video off. But when it comes to what all of these young athletes do, like I don't enjoy watching Chet Holmgren on TikTok doing the pop and lock. I think it's corny.
Well, yeah, you do have the free agency to turn it off, but now it's like part of ESPN's social strategy, right? It's
right.
You log onto Sports Center and whatever his name, Omar or whatever, is sending out videos of like things that have nothing to do with sports, but it's an athlete doing it. So it does have something to do with sports, I guess. And yeah, for me, I genuinely couldn't care less. That's an avenue of the business that I have very intentionally steered away from. But yeah, like you mentioned, there's a performative aspect to it. For me, you know, like Donovan, it's almost like I mentioned it last week when you're playing 2K and your answer to an interview question is like circle, triangle, X. Feels like that with a lot of these young players. And I think a lot of it is the environment that they grew up in, the social sphere that they grew up in.
Yeah, you nailed it. I mean, I guess I have a hard time faulting young people who are raised with cell phones as their babysitters and their best friends. Like, that's just the deal.
I heard an interview with a teacher recently who, and this is not sports related, but they told me that kids have changed in the last 10 years. Children have changed, right? Which this is kind of scary to me. They said that 10 years ago, I was just like seeing kids living their lives. Now, school is the kids pausing their real life, which is on a tablet or an iPhone.
Interesting.
And that is, I don't know how I feel about that, because those are the people who are spending the time with the kids.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. And look, final thing, and then we'll say goodnight. I'm sure people are already rolling their eyes here. When we started to monetize social media and influencers became a thing,
it's a brand.
The toothpaste was out of the tube. And so now everybody wants to be an influencer, and I think influencers are the ills of our society. I cannot stand this group of people, but it's also a way that a lot of young people make their way through the world. They pay their bills this way.
Yeah.
And once we started to monetize Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and we said to young people, you can actually get paid a lot of money if you are front-facing and performative by filming everything you do and then sending it out to the masses, that's when everything changed. And we're not going back. So It's just the world that it is now.
We're not. The word influence is different now, Spence. Influence used to be like something you garnered through like power or I don't know even what it is. Now, it's just whatever some brand is willing to pay you to put their product out there and pretend that you like it.
Mm-hmm.
Promo code ESPN 700.
Indeed. Say you can get $50 when you play your first $5 lineup. No, it's like whenever I hear they're going to ban TikTok. No, how? People are paying bills on that platform now. You'll get sued up the wazoo. Anyway, sports, NHL hockey on our station, NBA basketball on the Fan. Let's get out of here, Porter. What comes our way on a Thursday edition of the radio show?
On a Thursday edition of The Drive, Andy Larson stops by talking some Jazz off-season, probably some NBA playoffs, maybe some RSL. Go all over the map with one Andy Larson. Dave McMenamin stops by for our weekly hit with him, the NBA Daily Assist. Bill Armstrong met with the media this afternoon, in fact, while we're on air right now. So we'll play back some of that sound as the Utah Mammoth have signed a few new players this offseason. And we're going to catch up with the recently signed, the newest New Orleans Saint, former Ute, Terrell Burgess.
Nice. Always good catch up with Terrell. We'll say goodnight. Special thank you today, Tim McMahon, Neil Smith, Jason Christ, Chris Kamrani. For any of the sound you may have missed, basketball, football, soccer, hockey, we covered all of it, which is what we try to do on the show. Even though some of you don't enjoy that, that's our goal. ESPN700sports.com is the website. The mobile app is free for your consumption. It's the way I listen to our station. It is the ESPN 700 app store, Google Play as well. And then for what we do, check out the podcast page. So instead of complaining about what we're talking about in real time, you can go listen to whatever part of the show you want. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts, and it's available wherever you get your shows. Subscribe, rate, review, say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars. It helps. He's Porter. I'm Spence saying good night. Enjoy your Wednesday evening. Enjoy some NHL hockey. Coming up on the other side, we'll talk to you tomorrow right here on The Drive with Spence Checketts on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. We are proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network.